Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to Terra Invicta, a guide. The first of several smaller episodes that will eventually culminate into one long in total video. And today we are simply going to start at the beginning, how to set up a game and how to create one that you might actually be able to win. We begin, of course, by simply pressing New Game, where you are presented with a series of options, starting with Scenario. You may choose to begin in 2022, 2026, or a future 2070 scenario. The primary differences is the technological innovation and the state of the space race. The earlier you begin, of course, the fewer technologies are going to be available to you, and you are only going to have space-borne assets in 2070. For a new player, I would highly recommend you begin with the earliest 2020 scenario, as it will give you the most amount of time to mess around and learn the ropes of the game before things begin to escalate quickly. Then, you determine the size of the solar system. Assuming your computer can handle it, I would absolutely recommend the full solar system for the complete experience. Although, if you feel that the end game drags on a bit, and it definitely can, a medium solar system will cut down on travel time. But for your first run, I would recommend going full scale. Then, we're talking about factions. The game has 8 factions, including your own and the alien faction. Now, again, if you want the full experience, have them all on, but for your first run, I would recommend beginning with 4 or 5 factions. This is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the AI is programmed in such a way that as the player near inevitably pulls ahead, they will begin focusing more and more of their attentions and resources on the player. The classic crab pulling other crabs back down into the bucket thing. I would highly recommend also, by the way, that you install the mod No More Jealousy to take the worst edge of this, as if you're playing without the mod and all of the factions active, by the time you have actually gotten sufficiently far into the game that you've established a decent amount of dominance over Earth, every single other faction is going to spend every other agent and every other action to mess with you and you alone, and you will in essence be locked into playing defense for the rest of the game. It is not enormously fun, to put it mildly. Another reason why you want to begin with relatively few factions is to allow both yourself and the AI more playroom on Earth to get adequately established, and more importantly, to get established in space. The human AI has, basically since the earliest version of the game, struggled with asserting its dominance in space, and the full release version is no different in this regard. But with fewer factions in total, the remaining factions will be able to get their space assets up and running, and also be able to maintain a solid Earth economy without major interruptions, which will in turn also allow them to actually begin building some fleets and space assets, making the mid to early space game a lot more interesting, as your main enemy has a lot more of a chance of being humans than just the aliens. Then, we move on to the factions themselves. The Resistance is the classic opening faction, and the only one that has a tutorial. The tutorial, you should probably play it the first time around, but it's a classic grand strategy game tutorial. In other words, it'll teach you the mechanics, but not really how to play. The Resistance is your classic good guy faction. They wish to resist the alien invasion, but not at all costs. They wish to maintain that essential something that it is to be a human being. Their endgame objective will be to close a certain entry point into our solar system that the aliens have established, and that is it. They want to maintain both humanity and Earth without destroying the rest of humanity, which comes a little bit in sharp contrast to another rather extreme faction, Humanity First. Humanity First is exactly as the name indicates. It is humanity über alles. The alien must be destroyed, and as the alien is the ultimate evil, any other humans acting alongside or in favor of the aliens must also be destroyed. Unlike the Resistance, who will be happy to merely sever the aliens' access points to our solar system, Humanity First wishes to eradicate the alien, to teach them a valuable lesson that this is humanity's galaxy, and nobody else's. They are obviously the real good guys, but they're also the second hardest faction to play because you are going to have a lot of enemies. The exact opposite of this again is the Servants. The Servants recognize the aliens as superior beings and wish, simply as the name yet again suggests, to serve them, to help them take over Earth and become their favored acolytes. They are by far the easiest campaign to play, and if all you wish to do is to win a campaign, pick the Servants, absolutely, as it is far easier to sabotage your fellow human powers than it is to defeat the aliens. It does also have a very different playstyle. Whereas most other factions, you are intent on building up Earth, building up its power blocks, and making it difficult for the aliens to invade, with the Servants, you are actively breaking up superpowers. You wish to, for example, break up America. You want to reduce it to several smaller territories so that the American military superpower cannot present a unified front against alien invaders. The Servants win the game by traveling to a point in the solar system and dedicating themselves to the aliens. They can also research technology that makes it so that the aliens will not attack them and will even operate alongside the Servants, making a lot of the game, like military and space combat, infinitely easier. If you want something still fairly easy, but a little bit of a middle point between the two, you can choose the Protectorate. The Protectorates recognize that humanity is hopefully outmatched by the aliens. We cannot face them on the battlefield or in space, nor can we ever hope to truly be their equals, but we also don't want to become their pets, to be used and abused at the will of our new intergalactic overlords. Instead, the Protectorate will seek to build several massive battle stations surrounding Earth. These battle stations will not be intended to protect Earth from the aliens, however. They are intended to turn their weapons inwards, to keep perfect control over the planet and all of its various disparate factions and nations, and thus say to the aliens, listen, we can take care of ourselves. We will acquiesce to your demands. We will give you resources. We will give you the majority of our solar system, and we may even serve you, but indirectly. We guarantee that we will be on your side, but we wish to maintain a degree of independence. It is one of the easier factions because, yet again, just like the Servants, you can negotiate ceasefires and even outright alliances with the aliens, which removes your by far strongest enemy. Then, you have a more or less true neutral, the Academy. It is also by far the hardest faction to play because you are going to have the maximum number of enemies on Earth and in space. The Academy believe that the aliens, like all truly intelligent beings, must be able to understand the value of other sentient life forms. And so long as the Academy can convince the aliens that we are their equal, they will allow us to coexist. In essence, they wish to get a peace agreement with the aliens, and to, if not outright ally with them, at the very least be able to coexist with the aliens on a approaching equal status. This means, again, that you are going to have to fight other human factions. You're also going to have to fight the aliens quite a bit as well, as you are not seeking to simply make yourself utterly subservient to them. But at the end of a very long and very thorny path does indeed lie true neutral. But there are other ways of being neutral as well, in the form of Project Exodus. Project Exodus realizes that Earth is boned, pretty much utterly and completely. If it won't be torn apart by rivaling human factions, then the aliens will certainly finish the job. The only option then is simply just to leave. Exodus is not in this to compete for dominance over our solar system. They have no interest in Earth or Mars or Luna or Jupiter or any other planet beyond extracting resources from them to build enormous, vast colony ships that can be sent out into the darkness of space to colonize another habitational planet. Your objective as Project Exodus is simply to build this super vessel and then launch it out into space. This is also relatively easy. You're still going to have to fight a fair few factions, but as you are not actually interested in engaging with direct competition, you are largely left to do your own thing. And so long as you get your Exodus ships built and launched, you don't really care what happens to Earth. You are more than happy to reduce nations to ash because, well, you're gonna leave anyway. Simultaneously, you don't really need to contest space entirely with the aliens. You just need to get enough for your purposes. That is all. For those who are slightly more ambitious, though, those who indeed believe that there is a path to absolute self-service, we have the Initiative, the Illuminati. The Initiative recognizes the coming of the alien for exactly what it is. An opportunity. This is a chance to not just unite Earth in the face of a common threat, it is also an opportunity to take everything the aliens have to offer. Their technology, their very selves, their own solar system, in fact. Because after all, if they have a way to reach us, surely we have a way to reach them as well. And their endgame objective is to do literally that, to dominate the aliens, just as you will also dominate Earth. The Illuminati is probably the most ambitious faction, but it is also one of the sort of easier, because you get to play all the sides. When it benefits you, you can absolutely align yourself with humanity first. Simultaneously, when it benefits you, you can absolutely align yourself with the servants too. The Illuminati have no enemies, only future servants. And that's it. Out of all of these factions, personally, I would recommend beginning with the Resistance. It is the classical good guy run, it gives you a good Terra Invicta experience, and it allows you to do so without as many enemies. If you want the easiest option, the servants are obviously it, but you're going to have to be willing to take a lot of alien penis in order to do so, and if you can't stoop quite that low, the Protectorate is a good example of only taking some alien penis and not quite all of it. Obviously, the only true campaign is humanity first, and if you are a based what if we just take everything, the Initiative is obviously for you. But Now that we've selected a faction, we need to talk a bit about the game's settings. You do have some general difficulty settings, but I would highly recommend you customize the campaign. Not an accelerated campaign, mind you, as an accelerated campaign is very much so for more advanced players that already know exactly what to do and simply want to speedrun through the early game to get into space. For a new player that's not quite sure what they're doing, it is simply going to make the window of error even smaller, and it's tiny enough as it is. Terra Invicta is absolutely a game in which one error committed to 10 hours ago can ruin a 100-hour run. So, you do want to take your time. Once you've opened the customized campaign window, you will be presented with a rather dizzying array of sliders and numbers that might easily seem overwhelming, but don't worry, it's not as bad as it looks, and I'll walk you through the individual pieces of it to help you set up your campaign. Beginning with your starting counselor professions. You will begin the game with 2 agents. These are the people that you use to interact with the world through. We will go through exactly how to do that in the next video and how to utilize them. For now, the best start will be picking something like an activist, or a celebrity, or a diplomat. Personally, I mostly prefer celebrities, and if you simply want a quick and easy to start, just pick 2 celebrities. These are the people that steer public discourse and will help you take over nations, giving you a strong start to the game. They are also important when you're going to start taking over your first superpower, like America or China or the European Union. Alternatively, you can also pick up a tech mogul or a tycoon. These, of course, are business masterminds that will give you an early injection of cash and also help you take over organizations, which will provide buff to your agents. A good starting point, therefore, can be a celebrity and a tycoon, though I prefer simply a celebrity and another celebrity or a diplomat to get the great game rolling. Then, we have various options here. One is variable project unlocks. This I would highly recommend you turn off immediately. What this means is that in the game you will have a series of technologies that you can research. Many of these technologies will have sub-technologies that have a percentage chance of unlocking. So say for example you're researching a engine technology. It may have 2 sub-technologies with a 50-50 chance to unlock. If they unlock, you get access to them as normal. If they do not unlock, you have to wait until a super endgame tech to try and re-roll the ability to unlock that technology. This does allow for a more organic game where you might have to go, oh, well, my favorite engine didn't unlock. I've got to find an alternative. I have to improvise, giving a little bit of freshness to the playthrough. However, for a first game, you do not want to be in the situation where the engine you rely upon to move your fleets across the solar system simply doesn't unlock, as you are not going to have the experience required to find an alternative on the fly. So I would definitely turn this off. Show triggered projects, you can keep this unchecked, that's fine, especially if you uncheck this. Fellow citizen counselor, keep that checked. It's just an opportunity to give you a counselor of your own nationality. Cinematic combat scaling and cinematic combat movement, keep these checked as well. Cinematic combat scaling is simply just the size of your vessels, and obviously you want big and cool starships, duh. And cinematic combat movement allows you to move in a battle without expending fuel. Now, having the option to turn this off is very nice, but unless you know a lot about what you're doing, you do not want to put yourself in a situation where you can accidentally burn too much fuel to allow your fleet to return to port, or, stay in the gravity well of a planet, sending your massive investment of warships spiraling hopelessly into the cold darkness of the void. And definitely no alien invasion fleet, as you really don't want to have the aliens knocking on your door at the first day. Definitely not. Then you also have the option to choose a starting nation group. This is a nation that you start off in full control of. That is, of course, very nice, but I would recommend you do not do so for your first playthrough, because learning to take over a nation is very important. We'll go over the details on exactly how in the next video, but it will be a nice learning experience for something you are going to need to do a lot of times. If you simply want a super easy start to the game, then sure, just pick the United States or China and you'll be set for the next 10 in-game years, but I would recommend against it. Then we come to control points and mission control. So, base control points determines how many nations on Earth you can control, with each territory costing a certain amount of control points. This is the total amount of territory you yourself can personally control. I would recommend putting this as something like 225, 250, because, well, it's simply just a lot more fun to be able to play with loads of nations. It also gives you a greater opportunity to play with different setups and to build a more robust economy that is less prone to catastrophic failure. Again, this is absolutely a game where a decision made 10 hours ago can sink a 100-hour run, so I would recommend you give yourself some leeway. I would also recommend giving some leeway to the AI, maybe something like 100 points, so that they too can actively engage in large-scale bids for power across the globe. Otherwise, I tend to find that the AI grow rather stagnant, and worse still, the servants become utterly dominant because the other factions keep running over their control point cap and gets captured easily, whereas the servants don't really care because they're simply feeding their territories into the aliens anyways. Then comes bonus mission control. This is your ability to control assets in space, and is probably your single most important resource. I would give the player a bonus of maybe 30, 40 to 50 on this, because your ability to expand upon your mission control is mostly just logistics. It's building space stations dedicated solely to extending your mission control, and it's just kind of boring, really. It is a scaling mechanism intended to make sure that you don't grow too fast, too big. So I'd put it at about 50. If you want slightly less, maybe 20, 30. But definitely a little bit of a bonus. Then comes the AI bonus mission control. Slap this up to 100 right off the bat, okay? That might sound like a lot, and it is. It's a tremendous amount. But the AI is terrible at controlling its mission control. It is absolutely awful. It continuously gets itself into situations where it simply expends too much mission control and can't keep up with it, continuing to build bases and outposts even when it is blatantly over its limits. What this results in is that once a faction is over their mission control limit, their various space assets like space stations or mining stations will begin having a chance to flip to other competing factions. Since the AI continuously keeps building over its ability to control things, it ends up being an endless series of flips out in space. And it also means that the AI will suddenly lose access to vital resources that they need to simply maintain their current building and resource expenditure, causing the entirety of the AI space economy to crash over and over and over again. Give them 100. Hell, max it out at 250. They're going to need it, trust me. But 100 to 150, yes, definitely give them that much, just to make up for their own weaknesses. Then comes research rate. You will definitely want to put this one up a little bit. I would recommend at about 130%. Feels just right for me. It will give you a nice, long, solid feeling campaign without making the unlocking of individual pieces of technology feel absolutely torturous. It is a good balance, in my opinion, between scope and scale, and also constantly having some new toys to play with. It is particularly important as well because there are a lot of technologies in the game that are simply just redundant, that you just don't have any use for, or who are near immediately replaced by vastly superior technologies. There are even certain techs like the laser weaponry line, for example, and we will be talking about technology in depth later, where 90% of the tree is actually worthless, and you're only researching it for one end-of-the-line weapon system. Then it is alien progress rate. I would recommend putting this at about 70 to 75%. The aliens scale really fast, to the point where you're going to be facing battleships by the time you're building trash cans in space. Now, this depends a bit on your expertise and how good you are at building up, but for your first campaign, definitely 70%. If you do want to have that overwhelming experience of fighting uphill every step of the way, put it at about 130 and you're definitely gonna get it. Global mine productivity is the rate at which you extract resources from space. I would keep this at 100. In fact, most of these you can quite simply keep at 100, and they're nice and balanced. None of these are particularly problematic. You might, again, want to give the AI a little bit of a bonus here. For example, the human AI mining rate. You might want to put this up to 130%. Simply because, again, the AI is awful at taking care of its own maintenance. Many ships, many systems are going to require a constant upkeep of certain resources, like volatiles to send engines hurtling across space, for example, a simple fuel. The AI keeps messing up on this, so giving them a little bonus there won't hurt anybody. Everything else, you can pretty much just keep at 100. If you want a bit of a faster game that doesn't punish mistakes quite as much, you might want to increase shipbuilding speed a little bit, as building ships is a major investment of time and resources. And until you actually throw them against the enemy, well, you won't know how well they perform, or well, actually, there is a way to test your warships before you risk them in real combat, which is the skirmish mode, and we'll talk about that later as well. Then you can choose which factions are actually going to be active on the map, depending upon how many factions you actually chose to play with. I would generally recommend that whatever faction you pick at least one faction that is the exact opposite. So for Humanity First, it would be the Servants, for example. For the Servants, Humanity First. For the Resistance, it would probably be, again, the Servants, or maybe even Humanity First, honestly. And so on, so that you have some, enmity going on in the universe. These simply describe the name of your factions, adjective, name of your leader, etc., and the initial name of your fleet. So this, for example, would be India, then name of the fleet. Then you can select some pre-generated names for your ships, like if you want small ships to be named after mythological beasts, medium ships after heroes, or large ships after fighters, for example. Now that you've set all of this up, you are finally ready to begin your very first game of Terra Invicta, as you press the Start Custom Campaign button. These settings will give you a challenging experience, as Terra Invicta is a complex game, but it will tip the scales just enough in your favor to the point where I imagine you'll be quite likely to be able to successfully complete your very first campaign. Especially if you also check out the following guides in this series. Or if you're simply watching the ginormous video with all of the pieces combined. as the next guide upcoming, of course, is going to be on how exactly to play the game, to begin placing the entirety of Earth under your benevolent thumb, and finally raising an less benevolent middle finger up to the sky and the betentacled alien invaders.
We remember the day the stars answered, the day we learned we were not alone. As a familiar sun rose on an unfamiliar universe, some of us saw wondrous possibility and others existential danger. The astronomers had insisted that the bright streak in the sky was no natural phenomenon. Most of us didn't really believe them until it burned through our atmosphere and crashed in a remote region, leaving only wreckage and uncertainty. In our ignorance, we fractured, taking refuge in our most primal emotions. Each of us saw what we wanted to see. Survival of the fittest has always been the game. Whether you're beating your enemy with a rock or a lawsuit, you have to be vicious to be the top dog. Because when you've worked for everything, and you've fought for all you have, nothing will satisfy you, except everything.
Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to part 2 of the Terra Invicta guide, where today we are going to talk about how you actually play the video game and the opening moves you may wish to make to launch your campaign. And the very first thing you need to do is to look at all of this and forget about it. Just forget about all of this. Mabumbu, Makimaki, Mengpo, Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter, Mars, hell, even the moon. All of this is irrelevant to you right now. Terra Invicta is a very large game, and I know that a lot of people struggle with even getting into it because they feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. And it's easy to understand why. But Terra Invicta is actually a surprisingly approachable grand strategy game that will parcel out new challenges at a slow and steady rate, so don't feel overwhelmed. Instead, zoom on in and behold the Earth, which will be your playing board for the next, 10, 20 odd hours. You don't need to worry about the rest, just the planet, and how you are going to make sure that your ideology becomes the supreme ideology, puppeteering all the other various nations of Terra. And doing so will be your sole concern. Now, I won't lie to you, this, as you can probably tell from the length of the video, is going to be dense. There is simply no way to explain a game like this without it getting pretty dense. But we will take it step by step and explaining everything we do and all of the various ancillary values as we do so. And we will begin, of course, at the very beginning. We're not going to start talking about nations or armies or nuclear weapons or spacecraft or even the moon, our nearest satellite. Instead, we are going to talk about the instruments that you will be using to enact your will upon the world. Your counselors, your agents. You will begin the game with 2 that will either be selected randomly or be the agents you selected in the game setup. In my case, I have a celebrity and a diplomat. These agents can be fully customized over here with a ton of different animated portraits, both male and female. You can also change the sound of their voice as well if you so choose. Although I would highly recommend, by the way, that you install one of the anime portrait mods simply because, frankly, it's a lot easier to tell them apart when they're brightly colored anime girls. At least I think so. And it'll make it a lot quicker to remember who is supposed to do what. Who's your negotiator, who's your assassin, who's your enforcer, and so on. Let us begin then by breaking down all of the stats you'll need to know to utilize your agents to their utmost effect. You will have 4 primary windows: traits, attributes, monthly income, and missions. Out of the four, the missions are by far the most important, as you can have an agent with the best stats in the world, but if they can't actually do what you want them to do, well, they're pretty worthless, aren't they? Let's begin with the easy ones, though, traits. By and large, you can simply hover over a trait and see what it does, like extra income, for example, or extra persuasion in certain regions of the globe. It's all pretty self-explanatory, like plus 20 money and 1 influence. The only traits that you really need to look out for when recruiting agents are going to be 2 traits in particular, and that is Quick Learner and Striver. Now, none of these agents on offer here have these highly valuable traits. Quick Learner reduces the cost of leveling up an agent by 20%. As you can see right here, when we click the Augment button, it costs 20 experience point to add 1 ability score. And then there are some either cheaper or more expensive abilities, like adding Billionaire, for example, or Government. This Quick Learner trait reduces the cost of everything by 20%, meaning that you have to pay 18 XP for a new ability point instead of 20, and Striver reduces it by 30%. Over the course of a game that can last for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rounds, this is a massive advantage, and over the course of the game you will most likely want to replace all of your counselors with the Fast Learner or the Striver trait, because you're simply going to get way more points out of them over the long run. Another trait that you do want to look out for a little bit are things like Megastar, because they make it impossible for a character to go to ground, which means that that character will, worst case scenario, always be visible to your enemies, and thus quite vulnerable for getting assassinated. Now let's move on to attributes. Persuasion is your ability to talk people into doing what you want to do, and it is the single most important attribute early game as you seek to establish your control over the world, as it gives you access to Control Nation and Public Campaign, with Control Nations being used to outright seize control of countries, and Public Campaign being used to make it more likely that you can seize control of those countries. So Persuasion is your most important early stat, and in all due likelihood, you will want to put your first experience points into yet more Persuasion. Investigation is your ability to investigate phenomena or enemy agents. It will become crucial later on, especially for uses such as Crackdown, to make it easier to take over enemy control points, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Espionage is your ability to carry out actions against other agents, things like assassinations, for example. It is also your ability to stay hidden from other agents. When another agent discovers one of your agents, they will check their investigation versus your espionage. So if your characters have a very high espionage rating, they are unlikely to be spotted by the enemy, meaning that a high espionage is very beneficial for not getting shot. Command is your ability to command conventional military operations or sabotage actions. This includes things like sabotaging the launch facilities of enemy factions or assaulting alien assets, both on Earth and in space. Administration is your ability to handle large-scale organizations, and it does 2 things primarily. 1, it increases your global command cap, so how many nations you can control, and 2, it determines how many organizations you can control. We'll get to organizations in just a second, but what you now need to know now is that if you have administration of 4, you will have an org capacity of 4. Each organization costs a certain amount of org point represented by their numbers of stars, so 1 star costs 1 org point, 2 stars cost 2 org points, and so on. Science gives you a bonus to your knowledge, and it also allows you to resist alien influence later in the game. You want to give pretty much all of your agents about 10-15 points in this, but that is way later on, and you'll know when you'll need it, when the alien starts mind controlling people. Security is your strength of, well, safety. It's the adeptness of your security detail, and it is primarily used to protect you against threats that have already been launched. For example, if somebody tries to assassinate your leader, the security score is what tries to prevent that. And apparent loyalty is apparent loyalty, not actual loyalty, mind you. In fact, this character has a trait called Pollyanna, which means that her apparent loyalty is always set to 25, which is the max value of any of these stats. Her real loyalty, however, could be anything from 1 to 25. If an agent's loyalty is too low, this could mean that they might turn on you or start leaking your secrets to other organizations, a big no-no. And the only way to find out your precise loyalty is to carry out investigation missions on your own counselors, which will, after a while, reveal their actual loyalty score. The way you rise a loyalty, or raise it, is by using the Inspire ability, which again relies on persuasion, which is why persuasion is so very, 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 very important. The monthly income tab is self-explanatory. It simply tells you how much resources this agent generates. It is 20 money and 17 influence, and the mission tab is the most important. So, when we look at an agent that we wish to recruit, we have several options presented to us. This list of agents will regenerate about once a month or so. And we have one standout candidate immediately, Rupali Sunanda. Her persuasion is 9, which is great. She is also rich and a megastar, which will give me an increased bonus to both money and influence. And her inability to hide and her incredibly bad security isn't that big of an issue, because this early game, it is very unlikely that enemy actions will be using time to try and assassinate your characters. They will be wanting to secure the map first before they start worrying about messing with other people. Now, as we're going to use her as a persuasion character, we then need to check her missions. She has Control Nation, she has Public Campaign, Turn Counselor, and Inspire. This is the holy grail right here. She has every persuasion ability I want her to have. She is a perfect influence character. The only thing that could possibly have made this better was if she was a quick learner or a striver as well. So this is a absolute no-brainer hire right there. Now, there are ways to give access to missions that you do not have. For example, Bennett Lamont here. Now, he has the crucial ability to investigate alien activity, which is why we selected Diplomat. But you may notice he does not have a public campaign, which means it makes him a less than ideal persuading character. We have, however, Pisces advertising in the org market right here, which gives public campaign mission, so we will purchase that right away as well to make up for that one weakness. As there are cases where you can use an organization to grant yourself an ability that the character himself does not have. He's also got 48 experience, so he can dump another couple of points in persuasion to make him more likely to fulfill his missions. The recruited characters may also occasionally come with some experience points like this, so we'll give her 1 point in that as well. Now, organizations. Organizations are the easiest ways to add attributes to your characters. For example, Kane's security here has +1 to investigation and +1 to security. Normally, that would take 40 XP, which is 40 turns, as the way you gain experience points is by taking one of your characters and assigning them to a mission. Regardless of whether or not that mission fails, at the end of the turn, she will gain 1 experience point. So long as you keep your agents busy, they will always gain 1 experience point. And that is going to take a very long time. They are also a great way to gain access to ancillary abilities and stats too, like money, influence, and knowledge. As we can look at Antagri's research group here, it gives us +30 knowledge and 1+ to our science ability. Others will give you access to extra money, for example, and they might also give benefits to national interests, like Zenobia Brands gives you 1+ to economy, which simply means that your economy is going to go 1% faster. And this is on a global scale, so these are absolutely absolutely benefits worth stacking. You may also notice that there are little flags on the top of some of them. Now, the flags are important because the nationalities of your agents are important. If you want access to the 10th US Special Forces Group, for example, you don't just have to pay the cost of the organization, which in this case is 100 influence. You also either need to own the United States of America or have a counselor from the United States of America to be able to purchase this organization because it is headquartered in the Denver region. Simultaneously, Office 39 can only be bought if you have a North Korean agent or if you control North Korea. This adds an extra layer of complexity to which agents you want to recruit, because recruiting an agent, say from, for example, Israel, will give you access to Mossad, which is a very, very powerful and skilled organization, and even makes it so that recruiting somebody from Afghanistan, which will give you access to, I kid you not, Al-Qaeda, is also very, very tempting. And recruiting agents from major powers like Russia or America will give you access to special bureaus like the CIA or the FSB, which are usually quite expensive but also really, really, really good. That is a bit more of an advanced strategy, however, so don't worry too much about that right now. So, we've now gone over our agents. How are we actually going to use them? Well, our immediate goal is to start taking over countries, because countries is the easiest way we gain access to things like research and money. We are going to be using a lot of research and a lot of money, and later on it will also give you access to armies, and armies are amazing because they allow you to take other people's stuff, a favorite pastime for humanity throughout the ages. We then need to think about what we are going to do and what nations to take first. There are, generally speaking, 3 options that you want to start with, although I would highly recommend that you do one little trick first, and that is to send all of your agents to capture this silly little nation over here called Kazakhstan.
I'm here.
The reason why we take over Kazakhstan is because it is in possession of a very, very rare resource. In fact, it is the 4th largest producer of this resource in the world, namely Boost. Boost is your ability to put things in orbit, things like mining stations or orbital facilities, and you are going to be using a lot of it. And the earlier you get some of it, the quicker you're going to get into space. The quicker you get into space, the earlier you start mining space resources, which will be the single most important resources in the game. So getting into space quickly is very, very worthwhile. And, better still, Kazakhstan is a relatively small nation in which we are already very popular, making it easy to seize, especially for the Illuminati. You do want to get Kazakhstan out of its federation, mind you, as it is in a federation of the Eurasian Union, which ties you up to Russia. This gives Russia the majority of your boost, so once it's been a while, you can go to the Policy tab, and you will see an option here, Leave Federation. Once that is available, you simply want to get out ASAP. But a more long-term idea is what nation to seize. The obvious choice is the United States of America. It is the world's leading superpower for a very good reason. It has the largest economy, it has the largest army, it has excellent education, and will give you access to pretty much everything you want early game. Although, it is a nation undergoing some serious cohesion problems. Polarization. Polarization will give you a big negative modifier to just about everything, and you really don't want it under 5. You want to put this up at 5 or 6. Now, the easiest way to do this, as you'll need to know, is loads of welfare and loads of unity. That's the easiest way to fix this, because you want to lower inequality and raise natural cohesion. But that is the only real problem that America needs fixing. It has a ton of armies, and it has the most advanced armies on the planet. with their tech rating being Information Age 4.5. Compare this to a Chinese army of 3.9 or a North Korean army of 2.8. This number directly relates to how powerful the army is, and even a 0.1 point difference is quite significant. So a 4.5 army will absolutely annihilate a 3.9 army, and it won't even be hit by a 2.8 army. So America is the big stick. And because it has access to such a powerful military, and so much of it, it is also the best way to take care of alien invasions, as there are very, very, very few, but the largest mass invasions that America can't fight off, at the very least initially. But taking America is really, really hard, because your ability to seize control over one of the command points, like the financial sector in this case, is dependent upon the size of the economy and the population. America, being one of the largest and richest nations around, means that it's one of the largest and most difficult nations to capture. Now, for the purpose of this guide, we will be capturing America, or showing you how to do so, but we can talk about the other options too. Another option is China. China is in certain ways more difficult to capture and in certain ways easier to capture. It will give you a better long-term economic base with a bit of a weaker military, and it does require a fair bit more effort to actually get into. But so long as you capture the neighboring countries, all of them, you can get into China surprisingly quickly, though it is a little bit of a gamble. Another option is Russia. Russia's kind of like mini America. It's got most of the things you want, but in smaller quantities. It's got armies, it's got tech, it's got economies, and it doesn't have any massive issues with inequality or cohesion. And it's also very easy to get into to begin with. And an honorable mention must go to the European Union. See, the European Union doesn't begin as an actual formed nation. It begins as a series of smaller countries, all in the same federation, the European Union, meaning that first you need to capture one of the countries, like the United Kingdom, France, or Germany. Those are the primary ones, as they will give you a good access to economy and research. Once you have done this, you need to start capturing all of the European powers, as when you do, you will have the ability to unify these countries into the European Union. This is what is called a federation. So, there are coalitions of countries that have federations, which gives them the ability to unify each other either peacefully or via military means. For Russia, for example, it is in the Eurasian Union, which means it's in a federation with Kazakhstan. It also will have some claims on regions like Azerbaijan, for example, or other countries like Belarus here, for example, the Eurasian Union. If as Russia, you invade a place that you have a claim on, you will be able to take that region and join your nation directly. If you do not have a claim, you cannot simply integrate the region into Russia. You will instead place your faction in charge of the country, but the country will remain intact. The beauty of a federation is you don't even need to invade. If you capture all of the control points in France and all of the control points in Germany, then round about September of the first year, you can simply make the two nations join together into a much larger nation. And as the EU has claims on basically all of Europe, that is one hell of a superpower in waiting. It does require quite a bit of work and a bit more of an advanced knowledge of how the game does function, but a unified Europe, it is probably the single greatest superpower on Earth, especially if you can unify it early. But we're not going to worry too much about that. We're going to focus on America for now. So the last thing you want to do before you click Confirm Assignment is having a look at your Research tab. This is another moment where a lot of people go, nope, not going to play this game, as they see the Research tab. Yeah, it's a bit of a cuck in the, it's a bit of a kick in the balls, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, but don't worry, it's nowhere near as bad as it looks, okay? The only thing you need to worry about to begin with is these 4 options. That's it. We'll talk more about research in specifics later on in a separate video. For now, all you need to do is figure out what resource you want an injection of. Most of the time, early on, that's simply going to be money, so you select commercial research. You will also notice that there are 2 different sets of bars here. This is your research, the research that benefits you and you alone. This is where you research specific things like an engine, or an action, or the ability to build space stations, for example. Whereas these are global research. Everyone feeds into these. This is why you see these little numbers. So if I was to put 1 dot in here, then I am splitting my research 50-50. 50% towards my research, 50% towards we are not alone. To begin with, ignore that. Just concentrate on your own research and leave the global research to the AI. Later on, when you have a firm research basis, you want to start competing for these, because the faction that places the most research points into a global research gets to pick the next one. This is very, very important because it allows you to choose what research you're going to be focusing on. If you want to go to the moon, for example, you need Outpost Habs, then Mission to the Moon. If the AI keeps just ignoring that, you'll never get to the moon. Now, they'll pick it eventually, but obviously you want to be choosing what research is made next. In particular, you really want to focus on one particular research early on, and that is covert. Is it covert operations, or I need to remind myself. Right, it is clandestine cells. That's the one. Clandestine cells. So if we look at the tech tree, full search, clandestine cells, which I believe is, there we go, we are not alone. Under we are not alone on the full tech tree, it does take some getting used to this, and clandestine cells. There we go. Clandestine cells is one of the things you want to unlock the earliest because it gives you access to another operator slot, a new agent, which is a very big deal. So you want to set that as a research target to remind yourself to go for it, as getting new agents is very important. And your next focus then will be covert operations to get the full suite of agents available to you. Right then, that's all you need to know immediately, so let's click Confirm Assignment. Once you do that and you unpause the game, the simulation will begin. During this time, orbital mechanics will be in work, stations will be spinning, fleets will be moving, all of that, and the AI will be carrying out its missions. You will also be given a few permanent decisions early on, which Operations Section report here, select Management Team, where you get to choose a permanent buff, lobbyists and influencers plus 3 monthly influence, scientists and engineers plus 15 monthly research, officers and operators plus 50 to your ops budget right there, or financiers and investors, which gives you 10 money per month. I prefer scientists and engineers because you're pretty much always going to want research, and 15 research, although it's not a lot, it's something, and you're probably going to need it more than money or influence early on. Then you have the UN Security Council meeting. This is another scripted event where you have 3 options. Remain in the shadows, which will give you a nice amount of ops, which you don't need early on. It can be safely ignored. Quietly stay as support to the Archie Stun Supremacy, which is my custom named organization, which grants you a small public opinion boost. Again, not very valuable unless you're specifically going for something like China, and even then it's not really worth it. Or deliver our manifesto to the world, grants a public opinion boost around the world, and most importantly, gains you 50 influence. Now,
they are here to
this will also expose you to your enemies, as you are publicly declaring, here we are, these are our members, this is what we are doing, which will give you these icons right here on your advisor's portrait. These icons means that your counselor believes that they have been spotted by a representative of one of these factions. Normally, that does not mean that they have been spotted for sure. It simply means that the counselor believes they have been spotted. It could be a false positive. Additionally, this warning icon doesn't go away. So say that one of your counselors believed they had been spotted by Humanity First. Okay. One turn later, the icon will still be there, but there's no guarantee that Humanity First still has any information on your agent. Early game, you don't need to worry about this. Again, it's very unlikely that any of the AI will start assassinating people in the first 100-odd turns, so just ignore it. Eventually, you will want to use a go-to-ground mission to clear it. And we got triple control over Kazakhstan. Brilliant. Additionally, since we got a big influence boost, we are going to go back to recruiting and pick up Irene Meister right here. The reason why we're picking up Irene is because she possesses the next set of missions we really want. Now that we have 3 characters doing persuasion missions, taking over neutral nations, now we need somebody who can steal enemy nations, and to do that, you will require 2 specific missions. The first is Crackdown, and the second is Purge. They rely on investigation and espionage in particular. So that is the next set of missions that you absolutely want to acquire ASAP. Now we simply continue the turn until we arrive at the next orders phase. So this is, in essence, a turn-based game, until you start using, fleets and navies, in which case it becomes real time really quickly. Now, this woman, we don't need to worry as much about persuasion. What we want to care about here is we want to give her a point of investigation and a point of espionage, and start leveling these up until espionage is roughly the equal of her investigation. Having taken control of Kazakhstan, we are going to get ourselves a little bit of boost. We cannot carry out any leaving of the Federation just yet. You can simply click on the Policies tab, and you will see what policies are available to the nation at any given time. In this case, it's because we haven't consolidated control. I will consolidate control over Kazakhstan in 118 days. Once I've done that, I can start carrying out more official-sounding missions. For now, we are simply going to use her to defend interest. Defend interest locks down these points, meaning that it is very unlikely that an enemy is going to be able to take them from you, using the aforementioned Crackdown and Purge missions.
Ready for my mission.
Now that we've got Kazakhstan, we've got a little bit of boost bonus, we can start worrying about America. So, obviously, moving directly into America is not going to do diddly shit, as our ability to influence America is 12.1, 9 from persuasion, 2.1 from popular support, which is represented by this pie chart right here, and 1 from family ties, opposite 28.1 due to the size of the national economy. That's not going to work. So how do we get into America? Well, we start seizing control of neighboring nations, beginning often with Mexico. What we will do now is we'll start trying to take control of Mexico. We're going to do so, somewhat weirdly, by going for Guantanamo right off the bat. And then another agent goes to Mexico. Let's see, do we have any influence we can spend? We do. To boost your opportunity to take over a nation, you can spend resources like influence or money. As we are earning 92 per turn, I am more than happy to put 2 points in this, and this is just a straight boost to your counselor's abilities. So if we start with nothing, 65% chance. Not bad, but for a measly 2 points, I can make that a 79% chance. More than worth it. Off she goes.
Where do you need?
Bennett Lamont has a way worse chance. He would need 4 points for a 73%, which isn't terrible, but it's not great. What we're going to do instead is send him to Guatemala. There we go. And for now, we will simply confirm assignment again and let another turn
Securing
pass.
our interests.
You are also going to want to customize the nations as you gain control over them. So this you do via the priorities tab.
We were unable to establish control.
All right, 1 success, 1 failure, 1 success. Lovely. Okay, not too bad, not too bad. You customize your nation's focus via the Priorities tab, as you see right here. And before that,
I'm here.
I'll show you this too. Now that we have a control point in Guatemala, we will have a slightly
Standing by
easier
for
time
orders.
beginning to take over Mexico. Because you can see here, control points in neighbors. This is why we're taking over Mexico. Because if we take over Mexico, we will gain a 3-point bonus in any operations in America, which is absolutely vital. Now, America's borders are a bit unclear. I do believe the smaller island nations actually do count as borders, but in a country like China, it's easier to see. If you want to take over China, going straight into China isn't going to work. You take over Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, Bhutan, and Nepal instead, giving you a huge bonus to your operations in actual mainland China. But
Your orders?
let's give out some more orders. So our most competent talker, which is
Standing
Rupali Sananda,
I'm here.
will continue to keep trying
At your
to convince
service.
the Mexicans that
Bringing
I
them to
am in
our
fact
side.
their friend.
Ready to go.
The others will be sent
Acknowledged.
to other countries, specifically to Norway and Sweden. These are countries that are relatively easy to take
bring
over
this nation
because
to
they
our
don't
side.
have that many
Acknowledged.
people in them. They have incredibly tremendous populations,
Establishing our
GDP, but not a lot of people. This is very, very valuable, as we will use them as piggy banks for our future development. Now, Kazakhstan, as I mentioned, we only really want Kazakhstan for its boost. The only value here we really give a crap about is boost and keeping a hold of the nation. As you can see, the nation is increasing in strife. Strife is public unrest, and if it rises too high, there might be a coup in the nation, instantly getting rid of the currently sitting government, which in this case is us. So we're going to put a little bit of points into oppression, we're going to keep a little bit of points in unity to keep rising that up, and we're going to take some points out of knowledge. This will never be a major research point by any stretch of the imagination, nor will we care about welfare or environment here either. Nor will we really care over much about funding. These are points that are better spent otherwise. We will keep 2 points in spoils. Then we'll take the funding out of the space program, simply keep everything in boost, everything out of the military, because we're not going to be using this as a military power anytime soon, and there we go. The way this works is each nation has a certain amount of points, which is your monthly investment points. The monthly investment point will be divided according to these percentages. So don't think, for example, that more green dots means that you're putting everything into that. No. This is what you need to look at. I am investing 33% of my investment points into increasing my boost ability. Every time I put in a total of 2 points, my boost goes up slightly. The more investment points, the quicker it is to grow a nation. In the case of countries that we are just capturing to exploit, well, again, the piggy bank plan is in full effect. You only really want to take particularly good care of nations that you want to grow big and strong. Otherwise, well, you just exploit the shit out of them.
Our presence is
Which we will
growing.
show you with Norway and Sweden in
supporters
a
are in
second,
place.
as beautiful.
people in place.
We succeeded on absolutely
presence is growing.
everything. Fantastic. Oh,
trick is
and
not
some
to get
aliens are wandering about space as well, as our allies, our friends across the globe, just finish some global technology. Now that we have a control point in Norway and Sweden, we're going to set that to straight up kleptocracy, where we're going to put all of our effort into governmentalized, institutionalized corruption. Because the spoils focus is literally just funding money out of the national treasury and into your treasury as quickly as possible. Spoils is something you want to use on countries that you don't give a shit about, that you just want to drain of resources quickly as possible, because, well, you don't necessarily care about countries like Norway or Sweden if you're going to move over to America. If their economy collapses, well, so what? So long as you got a good amount of cash out of it first, that's really all that matters. And for certain factions, like the Servants or Project Exodus, you want to actively be crashing everybody's economy because, well, either you're gonna hand the Earth over to the aliens who don't give a shit about your GDP anyways, or you're gonna leave for a different solar system. So again, shrug, what do you care? But for a country like America, you want to treat it a little bit differently. So let's look at these priorities themselves and explain exactly what they do. Beginning with economy. Economy is pretty self-explanatory. It allows GDP to go up, 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 up. High GDP, good. Loads of GDP, loads of individual per capita GDP, good. This is a wealthy nation, and a wealthy nation will be able to put more funding into your pocket. It'll also keep people nice and happy, as a poor nation is rarely a happy nation. However, the economy should not be the primary factor because it doesn't rise that quickly. You'd prefer to have the economy basically just rising by a tiny little bit. Not too much, not too little, you just want a little bit of growth. Welfare is one of your most important focal points, which I know sounds a little bit weird, but it is, particularly for a country like America. America has high inequality and high polarization, or low cohesion more correctly. Inequality is simply created by having too much people in the hands of too few people, too much money in the hands of too few people. And you will reduce that by welfare, which will redistribute the wealth. You want your inequality to be low, because that will give you the least amount of negative modifiers. High inequality also screws over your cohesion, and cohesion is very, very important. It gives you a ton of negative modifiers. You do not, however, want your cohesion to be too high. You don't want China. You want it so that people are always afraid of what tomorrow may bring, but also hopeful that it might be better than yesterday. So a cohesion of around about 6 to 7 or 5 is ideal, and you want to keep it around there by increasing welfare and unity. These are your two most important scores. And once you've stabilized your cohesion, then you can focus more on economy and think like knowledge. Environment is exactly what you'd think it is. It is building better, more sustainable factories. You want a little bit in this at all times. You want this arrow to be green and up as early as you can, because climate change is really devastating in this game, and it will give you massive hits to your overall economy via random events late game. So you want to get this on the up and up as soon as possible. Don't invest much in it, but just enough to keep you in the green. Knowledge is obviously your research. That is going to be a primary point of investment for a lot of your nations, as more research means better warships, better guns, and better everything. Government determines your democracy score. This is only really important if you're planning peaceful annexations of countries. For example, if you want to peacefully annex Canada, which you can do via a research goal, your democracy score must be within 1.5 points of Canada's democracy score. If it is not, you cannot peacefully annex Canada. Now, there is a bit of a bug at the moment that means that sometimes, even if you are within 1.5 points, you still can't do it. You'll have to invade them anyway, but that is how that is supposed to theoretically work. But a flawed democracy is entirely fine. You don't want it too low authoritarian, and you don't really want it too high like a full democracy either, which, by the way, is a very misleading term, but details. Government is the best way to increase your government score, but 9 times out of 10, you don't need to worry too much about that, unless you're trying to drag China out of an autocratic state. Unity, as mentioned, is primarily used against your cohesion stat. Oppression is a funny one, because it's used for two things. One, taking care of rebels that are raising the insurrection score in your country and making sure that you don't get flipped entirely. It is also one of the best ways to flip an enemy nation that is heavily fortified. Say, for example, that Iran was owned by the servants, and they've got it locked down tight. It's got a sizable economy, all of the command points are guarded, and your chance to actually crack down and break one of them manually is like 2 or 3%. The easiest way to deal with Iran then is to utilize a bunch of characters with high command skills to increase unrest in the nation constantly until you hit the max. At which point, you can institute a revolution and flip the entire country overnight. Excellent way to take care of a undeserving dictatorial regime. It is also used to lower democracy score. If you want that aforementioned peaceful annexation, but the other country is just too damn big of a goody two-shoes, slamming maximum oppression in the country for a couple of years is going to bring that democracy score down real nice and real quick. Funding is funneling money legally and properly into your faction without any negative effects to the country. Every time you invest 1 point, you get 16 more cash per year. This counter up here, if you hover over it, you will see your monthly and your annual income. You can change between the two so that it displays either monthly or annual. I prefer monthly because that's a lot easier to tell what exactly you're going to get in the next turn. This will not have any negative consequence on the country, and so you always want a little bit in funding to keep your money growing. Spoils is taking money out of the country a lot quicker, at almost twice the efficiency, but with negative consequences. Now, there are several players that pledge to just going max spoils and ignoring funding entirely, arguing that the negative consequences can be made up for by other focuses, and that they are simply aiming to defeat the aliens before Earth's economy collapses. And that is an entirely valid strategy, but not, I would recommend, for a first-time player. Unless, again, you're playing Exodus, in which case you don't care, or you're playing the Servants and you want the Earth's economy to crash. Boost, again, is the aforementioned ability to put things into orbit. You want loads of that early on, and eventually, once you have a load of boost, you want to basically almost entirely remove your focus and boost and focus entirely on mission control. Early on, however, you have no need to focus heavily on mission control. Only start focusing on that when you're beginning to run out of the mission control you already have to begin with. Military is what determines your military tech level. This is very important for your stick nation. Generally speaking, you will want to focus nations around certain things, like using China purely for economy, for example, or using the European Union purely for military, or using a country purely for research. In the case of military, you want to keep a maximum military investment at pretty much all times, as you want a strong, high-technology army to be able to take on any enemies and eventually the aliens. Build army is the opposite. This is actually creating a physical army on the map, as you can see here. Don't worry too much about that, because whilst armies will add to your unrest levels, as in they will suppress unrest, obviously, they cost money, and they affect your economy negatively. Don't build armies until you need them. And generally speaking, if you've got 8 armies in America, that is enough stick to take care of basically anything. So you want a high-tech army more than you want many armies. You will also be able to build navies, which is also a priority point that is only available if you actually have a free navy available, which I don't know if any countries have at the beginning of the game. But For every army you create, you can also make a navy. This will give you a little anchor icon next to the army. That anchor icon means that your army can translocate over the ocean to somewhere else because they're going to use the navy assigned to it. Additionally, if you are at war, the faction with the most navies can block the other faction's access to the ocean. Say, for example, the United States with its 6 navies is at war with China with its potential 4 navies. Since America has 6 navies and China only has 4, China cannot move troops overseas at all. Which is very, very useful, but navies too cost a lot of money to maintain. And finally, you have nuclear weapons. There is practically no reason to ever build nukes, because nukes do massive damage to the economy. The only reason you'd ever want to create a nuclear program is if you are a nation that you're going to build up later that is in danger of being invaded. Say, Iran, for example, being afraid of America. Getting one nuclear bomb in Iran will make it far less likely that the AI will invade you. And the reason for that is that nukes are really, really powerful. Way more powerful than they are in reality. If you detonate a nuke in a region, it will destroy all armies in that region, or damn near all. It will wipe out the entire US army in a single attack, all 6 stacks, or maybe it'll leave one barely alive. And this will continue until very late game. Nukes can wipe out armies very easily, which is why nukes are the best way to stop anyone attacking you. And it makes wars between nuclear nations very dangerous, which is why if you want to invade Russia, you better take control of it first and disarm its nuclear weapons before you invade them. Nukes also, of course, do enormous damage to the infrastructure and the economy of whatever place you hit. It kills a lot of civilians, and it destroys a lot of factories and buildings. The only people that want to be using nukes liberally are the servants, and to some extent, the people that want to leave Earth, because, well, you don't care. The servants want to actively use nukes because every nuke you detonate is a massive downgrade to the Earth's economy. And if you detonate enough nukes, well, that's a nuclear winter, which will fuck everyone's economy. And if you can blast apart the majority of the Earth's nations as well, all the better. It is entirely a functional strategy as the servants to seize Russia, declare war on everyone, and then simply nuke every country in fucking Europe one by one, every nation, every continent, every place, simply just to donk the economy into the ground. Nobody else wants to do that, though, because this is all money that you could be earning instead of simply making it go, you know, kablooey. And in most cases, you're gonna have plenty of nukes to begin with. You're not gonna be using 28 or 30 nukes anytime soon, either. That then is an explanation of your priorities right there. You do also have a further policy window, which is primarily for things like declaring war, granting independence, disbanding armies, or unifying federations. Now, granting independence is an interesting thing, because in some cases, if you're playing as the servants again, you might want to break up superpowers, and there are researchers that allows you to invent new countries, like the First Nation, which is the Indians in America. If you research that, you can force America to cede a bunch of Indian territory off to the Indians, which will severely weaken the United States. Alternatively, you can also research the opposite, which gives America first claims on North America, then claims on, well, North America in its entirety. Everything from Panama and upwards is all in the US sphere of influence, including Greenland, of course. This isn't a way to make certain nations a lot more powerful, like the European Union, for example. You also have the African Union. Now, I would not recommend starting in Africa for anyone but the most expert of players, but you can theoretically unify pretty much all of Africa, which will become an enormous superpower if you do. But God help you, the road to that is gonna be long and thorny in gosh darn deed.
We'll be running this place in no
So,
time.
let me show you a little bit more about what you're going to be doing now. Now that you understand generally why you're doing things, for what goals, we are going to continue taking control over Mexico by using our agents and our decent supply of influence points to give us a good
We'll
chance to
bring
do
this
so.
nation to our side. We can.
There we are. We are going to continue taking over Sweden and Norway. That was 100 more money. Excellent. We are going to do the influence one next. And now that we've got an injection of money, we can see if there are any more organization we want. Oh, and right off the bat, there's an excellent one there. Stratos Strategies, which gives us 1+ persuasion. Fantastic. Pick that up. Zenobia Brands gives me 18 money. Sure, absolutely. Why not? And we've got one here that gives me plus espionage, which would be perfect for my future spying lady. There you go. Hopefully that will result in us gaining control over the remaining control points in Mexico. We've got a pretty good chance of doing so.
Our presence is growing.
There we go.
To take control.
We failed in Norway.
Our supporters are in place.
Succeeded twice in
We've got
Mexico.
our people in place.
Excellent. Now that we have all of the control points in Mexico, you can begin to see the plan to take over the United States begin to manifest. Also, remember, kleptocracy. The Swedes and the Norwegians exist solely to be stolen from. That is the only reason they exist. Now, with Mexico secured, we can have a look at America
Standing by
again.
for orders.
And you can see now, suddenly, we've gone from 0 to 1% chance because control points in neighbors plus 3. Now, 1% is not enough to do anything, but if you look at the public campaign, 75%. The next step to begin taking over America, again, making sure that you take over the Scandinavian countries so that you have a slush fund to drag
Where to?
resources from, is to begin running public campaigns in the US, spending a little bit of money to make sure that you've
Your
got
orders?
a good chance of success. And with our Scandinavian
our
piggy
side.
banks under operation, we should have plenty of cash to spend. The public campaigns is meant to increase the public opinion in our favor, as public opinion is the single biggest bonus you can create with your agents.
We have moved the needle.
As we go from 7% support to 19% support. You can also now simply click permanent assignment, and your agent will repeat that mission again and again, however many times it takes to secure the nation. More money. We're gonna need it. We're gonna burn through quite a bit of it.
We're taking over.
We're taking over.
Our piggy banks are growing quite beautifully. As you can see, we are now gaining more and more money every month. As our public opinion grows, our abilities to influence America
Your
grows
orders?
as well. Now we're at 3%. Now 3% is not enough just yet, but if we maximize our influence, 18%. Now, an 18% chance doesn't sound like a lot because it isn't, but again, remember, this is a game that takes hundreds of turns to play, and so an 18% chance really genuinely is not that
Standing by
bad.
for orders.
Simply start moving all of your agents over, giving
Ready for
them
my
a
mission.
decent little chance to start influencing the nations, continuing to grow the piggy banks as you do so.
Putting our people in place.
Everything into kleptocracy. Everything into kleptocracy. And very, very soon, advisory team. This one is usually good for international aid because it boosts welfare and knowledge, two things that you will be needing the entire campaign. As we let another term come to
Public
an end
opinion
there,
is moving in our
27% public.
Our cause is
And
unjustified
now
to
that
them.
failed,
Our cause is unjustified to them.
We've got our people in place.
and we got ourselves another control point.
The dreamer in you.
Excellent. We are earning 96.6 influence per turn now, so
Ready
we can
for
begin
orders.
to afford to actually put some effort in. We can also level
Ready to
up
go.
her persuasion once, and we shall absolutely do so. And now we've got a 27%. That's good enough. Once you start hitting 25 to 27%,
Putting our people in
simply
place.
start carrying
What's
out
the op?
control missions whilst continuing on with the public
I will try to sway
campaigns.
the public.
Very, very soon,
Standing by for
you'll get your
orders.
first control point in America. Once you've got one, you'll get a bonus to new control points. So as soon as you're in the door, getting all of the US will be done pretty damn quickly. Once you've got the US, well, then you can start looking about for pretty much any other nations you want to take over, as the world will be your playground. Additionally, you might want to start wielding America's ginormous stick against other uncooperative nations. But that will be the end of this early game guide, as I have now explained the primary mechanics, the primary ways to begin your game, and how to start getting a foothold in the United States of America, which will give you a nice and super powerful start to the game. We are going to produce a few more guides, as we've just done the early game. We haven't even touched upon the research tree, or space combat, or space in general, but that is for a later time. The only thing you really need to know immediately now is the moon. Probably not worth it. You probably want to go straight for Mars, because it's going to have way, way better resources, and that boost is going to be a very precious resource for a very long time. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day. Mark. Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to part 3 of the Terra Invicta guide. Today we're going to be talking about some more complex missions for your agents, as well as the end of the early game and the beginning of the mid-game. Technologies you might want to research, and how to prepare for the inevitable arrival of your new alien friends, who will at this point already be sending pretty damn large warships bumbling about the solar system. And also, the most important part during this particular period of the game, the space race. How to enter it, how to win it, and what to focus on. So, before we get into space, we will have a quick look at Earth. By now, you should certainly have conquered America and created a nice and solid power block. I am going to use Europe in this case, as it allows me to demonstrate a couple other interesting points. As during the course of the campaign, I have slowly but surely been taking over the various nations in Europe. And I'll be showing you how to take over a large-scale hostile nation, hostile for the, purposes of this demonstration anyways, as well today, as the Resistance controls Russia. Now, I had no problems with the Resistance controlling Russia until they aggressed upon me in Kazakhstan, and now I feel the urge to punish them for their aggressions. You will also notice, by the way, it's 2026 and Russia is only now beginning to take over Ukraine. Yep, early game military expansions are very slow and very, very, very costly. But let's now talk first and foremost about the space race, shall we? As that is one of the earliest sort of beginning of mid-game, late early game things you're going to worry about. In the tech tree, you will be seeing certain research points beginning to unlock quite early. These are things like mission to the moon, for example, which will eventually lead into things like missions to Venus and missions to Mars. Mars is by far the most important. Now, the moon, 9 times out of 10, isn't going to be worth much. You should send a probe to it as soon as it's unlocked regardless, just to check it out. In this case, there was one good space on the moon, which had a good number of base minerals, but that's about it. I think I've seen precisely one time in all of my playthroughs where the moon actually offered a serious amount of decent varied resources. And the problem is, to go to the moon, you are going to be expending boost of course. And that boost is far, 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 far better spent on bypassing the moon and traveling directly to the red planet instead, as the red planet will have a lot more varied resources, as you can see here. Instead of having access to only base metals, you've got water, you've got volatiles, base metals, noble metals, and fissiles all on the same spots. So if you're going to be burning a very valuable and slow to accumulate resource anyways, you might as well use it to get where the largest quantities of valuable resources are. To begin with, you simply want to focus on the area that has the most resources in total, and thereafter you want to be slowly claiming new spots as fast as you can, up until the point, of course, where your mission control can no longer handle it. You want to keep about maybe 10 odd points, because you want to maybe build some early navies, although generally speaking, I don't see a huge point in building an early navy. The AI is not going to be building a whole lot of early navies, and you're really not going to be contesting the aliens early game anyways. In the next video, we're probably going to look at some of the navy compositions and how you can technically contest the aliens with only a few rudimentary pieces of technology. All you technically need is interplanetary warship, a 40mm cannon, and some basic missiles, which you can get very early on, but you're gonna need to outnumber the aliens like 3 to 4 to 1 to pull off a successful attack, and you're gonna suffer significant casualties in doing so. And every casualty is, of course, a massive investment in minerals that you could have used to simply expand your mining lead in space instead. It is very rarely worth it to engage in a super early takedown of a space fleet of the aliens, especially as, well, they've got a hell of a lot more resources than you out in the outer solar system. So, when you're heading to Mars, you want to just slowly expand your abilities and grab more and more territories as quickly as you can, even if you can't build everything finished right away. Initially, as soon as you have the boost to do so, you want to send a simple core to Mars, just a little outpost core. That's already going to cost you a lot of boost. Once you've got that up, a power generator, which is probably going to be a fission pile, is next. And only once you've got all of that up, then you can start thinking about sending an outpost mining complex, which is going to cost you a lot of boost. By the time you get this initially, you're probably going to be paying something like 126 odd boost to send out the mining complex from Earth. Now, there are technologies that you can get over the course of the campaign to make this a lot cheaper. Things like nuclear sleds, for example. That will help you because it moves up the speed at which you transport resources. There are technologies to unlock an increase in the investment on boost, so you get more of it. And eventually this will get both faster and easier, but to begin with, every ounce of boost is precious, but it is also precious for your enemies, which is why, even if you can't effectively mine it, you simply want to claim territories to begin with. Then you can start becoming reactive. For example, I am running out of water right now. Now, don't worry about running out of any individual resource initially. That's not a problem. You will simply use a small amount of boost and money to send up that resource instead. So if you run out of water, your people on Mars won't simply just die of dehydration. It's just that you will be using some boost and cash to keep money being transported to Mars. So don't worry about that. You're also going to want to build as quickly as you can. Whenever you have the boost, you want to build more, because it's going to take about a solid year to transport anything to Mars. But you want to get started, again, because this is where all of your resource income is going to come from. Meanwhile, whilst you're doing this, you want to of course expand your grip on Earth. And to do that, there's a few key researchers that you're going to want. One of the first one, of course, that we've mentioned already is covert operations. So, covert operations come from quantum encryptment, and I'd like to see the whole thing. There we go. Covert operations come from quantum encryptments. It comes at the end of a relatively long research tree, but it finally unlocks your last agent. You want to try and go for this as early as possible, as the sooner you begin leveling them up and getting them experience points, the sooner you're going to have a fully flushed out set of agents. I've come a decent long way in building my harem, of course, of agents right now. The only ones I still want to change out is Ricardo and I believe maybe Matilda here. Everybody else has quick learners and strivers. Ricardo will continue to be my primary persuasion agent for some time yet. Matilda exists primarily to give me a huge amount of administration and in turn a massive amount of organizations, which initially will be focused on giving me more boost, because it takes a very long time to build boost on Earth. The quickest and easiest way to get more of it early on is to simply buy organizations that give you more boost. And thus, a character that focuses near exclusive on administration will give you the option to do so, as well also as extending your ability to take over more nations. Mantong Peng here is my purification agent. She's focusing on investigation and espionage so that she can run crackdowns and purges. Now, if you're taking the United States, this is not as important, as you're not going to need to worry about expanding for quite some time. But if you're taking Europe, country by country, oh yeah, you're going to want this very, very early, as each and every one of these nations, from Ireland, Portugal, from Italy to Spain, have all been cracked down and purged of enemy occupations over the course of the last 6 odd years, or 4 odd years. Then we have Oksana Romanova here. She is my backup investigation and espionage character, and also a second administration character. She's a little bit of a jack of all trades here, which is not ideal, but I like having a second character do investigation espionage. You definitely want a secondary investigation character, because you don't want your primary assassin, which uses espionage, to be investigating as well. Whilst your assassin, which in my case, in Mantong Peng, is out killing enemy agents, Oksana is out looking for new targets, and also helping with the crackdown activities. The Fantasy's high administration is also very, very useful, and she, as you will note, is a criminal. So, there's a couple of traits you want to worry about now that you're entering the early mid-game, and that is government and it is criminal. Government traits gives you access to governmental organization like the Main Intelligence Directorate or the Secret Intelligence Services, the MI6. These government organizations are usually very powerful. Like the MI6, for example, gives me 2 ops per turn, which is quite good, and 2 investigation, 2 espionage, and 2 security, along with a ton of missions. Now, it's also costing me 50 money a turn, so it is an organization that you want to shed eventually as you continue to level up your characters. But early game, this is fantastic, and you have to be a government character in order to be able to get these organizations. Meanwhile, a criminal character can get access to things like the Hong Kong Triad, for example, or the Taurus organization, or indeed things like the Al-Qaeda or the Yamaguchi-gun, the Yakuza. Now, criminal organizations are usually even more powerful. Look at the Hong Kong Triads, for example. 45 money, 1 influence, 2 ops, 2 espionage, plus 1 administration, which is a very rare and very precious ability granted, and 2 security plus 4 spoils. You will also notice that criminal organizations often give you a bunch of extra money and organization. This is why criminal agents are very, very, very useful. However, do bear in mind that if you have a governmental counselor and a criminal counselor, sometimes they're not going to get along very well and might create random events that will cost you a lot of resources or lower one of their loyalty scores. Frankly, it's really not that big of a deal. It's a minor hit here and there, and occasionally one of them might go to jail for a bit, but compared to the advantages given, oh yeah, absolutely. Get a government agent and get a criminal agent. Especially if you don't have an agent with the assassinate mission, which is very, very valuable. If you find one with excellent espionage but doesn't have assassinate, make sure they don't have ethical. And then, if you give them criminal, you can simply give them something like Kazoo Industries, for example, to give them assassinate. Very, 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 very useful. And then we have Brynja Bukard here. She's not specified in anything at the moment. She was bought primarily because she is a Striver, which is that very, very, very rare core ability that gives you a 20% decrease to experience cost instead of the 10 of Quick Learner. I remember now that I've actually mentioned that wrong because it used to be different. But still, Striver, incredibly valuable. It usually comes at the cost of a fairly advanced age, but it's not a big deal. Agents only start dying of old age at about 70, 80 odd, and by that time, you're gonna have all kinds of technology to increase their age limits, so don't worry. I haven't had a single agent ever die from old age. And again, lowering the cost of new levels to 16 XP is a big deal. And furthermore, of course, it isn't just the ability cost that you're decreasing, you're also decreasing it on things like Affluent and eventually Billionaire, which will give you a lot of extra cash. Another thing you want to be researching quite early on is cybernetic implants right here. Cybernetic implants gives you access to a series of upgrades that will give your characters extra ability points. And again, seeing with how rare attributes are, that is an absolute no-brainer investment and will eventually lead to even better upgrades, to the point where I think the max you can get is +3 in practically all of your attributes by just spending money. And at this point in the game, money is honestly pretty cheap, so definitely focus on getting that as early as you can as well. Now, we also need to talk a little bit about research in and of itself, as we look at some of the stations that have been built around Earth. Once you've got a couple of mining claims up and running, and you've got all of the mining equipment on the way, you can start thinking about using some boost to fire up some orbital stations. You want orbital stations around Earth because so long as you put them in interface orbit, that is important by the way, when you are funding a platform, make sure it is interface orbit. Then you can use those platforms to build various buildings that boost your research capabilities. As you can see here on the research screen, I have a 79% boost to information-based research, 22% boost to societal research, and a 28% boost to space research. This is coming in part from my counselors and their various organizations, and it's also coming from these space stations. As you can see here, this has a space science lab, giving me a 2.5 stacking bonus for every space science lab I have, and even more importantly, you will see grants a 3% bonus to our investment in mission control point if module is in an Earth interface orbit, up to a maximum of 30%. So, since I have loads of models here, I've got close to that maximum bonus, about I think 25 odd percent. You want to build one of each one of these research systems around Earth in interface orbit as soon as you can, because it simply gives you a massive increase to your national investment pool. A 30% bonus, again, over the course of a game that runs hundreds of turns, it stacks up quick. As you can see with the European Union here, it is doing pretty damn well. I might need to put a little bit more into GDP just to stabilize things a little bit there, but my economic inequality is nice and low, my cohesion is rising, my education level is superb, and I'm getting a very solid amount of research and boost out of Europe as well. To the point where, in fact, I'm thinking we can decrease our boost investment a little bit now, as I've started building up quite a nice little space economy. Once you've got yourself established, though, the question begins, what are you going to do next? Okay, you've got a nice power basis on Earth, and you've begun to expand into space. Where do you go from here? Well, the initial decision is Earth-based, as it's going to take quite some time for you to build up enough resources to really start wanting to expand into space beyond areas like Mars. So you want to look around the map and see if there's anything interesting to seize. In this case, America remained unclaimed for a very, very long time. Now, I can see here that the servants have started to take a little bit of inroads into America, which is not great, and I might want to deal with that sooner rather than later. But my primary interest right now is going to be Russia, because if I manage to wrestle Russia out of the resistance control, plus I don't have that many control points at the moment, although I will be getting quite a few from confederations soon, I will have the European supercontinent. It is well on its way now. I am mostly just waiting for the various membership nations to run down their cooldown periods on diplomatic actions with the European Union. And then my unification of EU will be pretty much complete, giving me a nice, big, hefty superpower nation. Getting Russia out of the way is but one step of that, where I can cede some territory, destroy their nuclear arsenal, and maybe consider starting to break them up a little bit, as I probably have no long-term interests in Russia. Now, if you've taken over America, your immediate first interest is going to be China. China is a fantastic secondary country if you begin as a nice solid superpower, because it's going to have one of the best economies out there, and also one of the best investment pool ratings. Now, China is rather difficult to break into due to the sheer size of its population and economy, but again, remember, we start taking over the neighboring nations one by one to give us bonuses in China. If you've already taken over America, it should simply just be a question of time and rolling the dice. Once you've solidified your plans on Earth, you can then start looking out into space again, and your long-term prospects out there in the deep darkness of the void. Don't worry about military conquest just yet. Start instead by locating aliens. You will be getting a series of objectives like kill an alien, track an alien, salvage alien tech over the course of the game. These will also unlock technologies like ferrocites, for example. I wonder if I have one available right here. I don't think I do. Oh, there we go. Xenodefoliation. It will be marked with this icon. You want to be doing these, except for xenodefoliation, which is an exception, relatively quickly, because they will unlock new anti-alien missions and will also unlock a powerful, unique organization at some point. Some get it a lot earlier, like Humanity First gets theirs quite early, whereas the Illuminati gets it relatively late, but it's an incredibly powerful one. And you will then need to kill an alien. Killing an alien is not necessarily super simple, although it has actually been made a fair bit easier than it used to. As aliens will have access to organizations like you do, they will have a pretty hefty fucking stat line, which will get a lot worse as the game goes on, believe you me, and will have a whole heaping heck of a lot of missions. But on the bright side, the aliens haven't quite figured out how to enter our atmosphere safely yet, which means that when an alien crashes down, that's it. He can't move like your agents can across the globe instantly. He has to move from country, from area to area to area very, very, very slowly. This will continue until the aliens manage to set up an alien administration later in game, when they too get access to air travel. Now, how to find an alien? The easiest way is to do what I've done now and build huge numbers of xenolaboratories up in space. I don't know if it's this one, it's probably not. That's a space science lab, that's a materials labs, that is a military lab, that is an information lab. There's the Xenology Lab. So, Xenology Labs will not only give you a big bonus researching Xenos tech, which if you're playing the Illuminati is a great idea, by the way, because you will gain the ability as a unique tech to start mind controlling the aliens. And that includes their megafauna as well, by the way. You can have your very own pet kaiju as the Illuminati. But, more importantly, grants a +1 bonus to alien detection on Earth if the module is in Earth interface orbit to a maximum of +9 across all faction halves. That is a big deal, as it gives you a +9 to detecting all enemy agents constantly. That'll let you spot them pretty damn easily. In fact, I do believe there are 3 operative agents on Earth right now, which I'm pretty sure is also all of them. Right now, the aliens are beginning to investigate humans, so the aliens need to carry out these abduction missions to start expanding their control upon the Earth. Every one they do, they begin unlocking further capabilities, so preferably, you want to be taking care of these agents relatively quickly. However, do bear in mind that this will also piss off the aliens. If you start assassinating their agents, they're going to start burning your shit down. You might be able to get away with 1 assassination without any serious consequences, but after that, every time you kill one of them, expect them to start burning some of your space stations. And that is simply just a cost of doing business early on. You're not going to be able to defend yourself early on. You're simply just not. Now, there will be things like, if I can remember the name of it, orbital defenses maybe, who knows. I don't know if I remember the name of it. But there is a technology that gives you access to orbital defenses. The orbital defenses are built on your orbital rings or your orbital centers. They will take up 1 slot. I think they're somewhere around here. Even I have not learned this godforsakenly massive tech tree by heart by any stretch of the imagination, and it really could use some improvement, but trust me, there's a way to build defense platforms on these orbital stations. However, your initial platform is going to be a gun, a singular gun. It's not going to stop even a light enemy skirmishing ship. In fact, even super late game, when you have a fully upgraded battle station with fully upgraded lasers, fully upgraded mass drivers, etc., the best you can hope to chase off is a light alien skirmishing fleet. Honestly, I largely consider building defenses to be pointless. I only really do so if I need to discourage the enemy from attacking something, or if I have so many resources that it really doesn't matter anymore. At this early point in the game, frankly, it's pretty affordable to have them burn one of your stations, especially if it allows you to kill one of their agents on Earth, so just pucker up and suck it up to begin with, as it's gonna be a while before you start building functional spaceships able to actually keep them out of your orbits. Now, to begin with, you only want to kill the first alien that you have an objective for. It would be lovely if you could kill a bunch of them, but the consequences are probably going to be too dire, as they will scourge you from the solar system if you piss them off enough, which will put you in a less than ideal situation. So kill the first one and then back off until you've actually got something resembling a fleet up and running. And don't worry about beginning to build military research or military ships right now. Again, you're not going to have anything truly effective for quite some time. Your primary purpose now is going to be to expand your control over the solar system, which after Mars is going to be Venus and then Mercury. Mercury is a planet that has been nerfed multiple times over the course of the game's development cycle. And the reason why Mercury is so good is because it sits very close to the sun. See, the game has two primary ways of producing energy, power, which is of course used by all buildings. The first is nuclear fission or fissile materials. By burning a little bit of fissile materials, you generate power. On Mars, you are going to be using fission files almost exclusively because Mars is really far away from the sun, which means that solar arrays just aren't going to work very well. Whereas on Earth, to begin with at least, solar arrays are more than enough to give you all the power you require. Eventually, fusion and fissile materials will outpace solar arrays by a pretty significant margin, though. But that's why Mercury is so gosh darn good. Because, of course, on Mercury, you sit super close to the sun, which means that even 2 or 3 solar power generators can power an entire base, making it fantastic for massive research-intensive research operations. Energy intensive, there we go. Research operations. It also has some resources, so you might as well mine it, but its proximity to the sun makes it super useful for research. Now, there is a punishment involved in this, and this is radiation. This site is receiving dangerous levels of naturally occurring radiation. Any HAB module built here will have 2 times its normal mass to account for all the shielding necessary to protect fragile electronics and crew members, which means building anything on Mercury is going to be really, really expensive. But it is your best bet for research, so Mercury is your next step, and it will also eventually be the place where you put all of your antimatter farms, but don't worry about antimatter just yet. It's another one of those things you don't really need to worry about right about now. Once you've got all of these basic systems up and running, you can then start considering military technology, which we'll cover in the next one. For now, we're going to see how our assassination mission goes on, and we're going to talk about how to start conquering nations like Russia, for example.
Hunkering down.
Let's see what our little assassin's got going here. She's got decent amount of information. Arms purchase. Would you like to purchase arms? 19.2k. Ouch. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about that indeed. She's got a pretty decent chance of pulling this off. Research, augmented learning, high trust economics, graphene batteries. None of this is immediately threatening. Operations centers, research campus. There we go. She's got a decent chance of pulling it off, 69%, and she failed. Which is, of course, going to happen.
Person of interest surveilled.
Now, luckily, I've got a second agent who is carrying out an investigation mission on the F4 Alpha. God help me. On the Xenoform Alpha 4. Jesus. So long as you continue to succeed your investigation roles, you will continue to keep an eye on the alien. So, next turn, you can simply try again with your assassin until you've nailed the slimy little bastard. Initially, this should be easy enough. Now, later on, you are going to have certain traits, like hard targets, for example. Hard targets means that if you critically fail the assassination attempt, your agent might be killed in return.
Where to?
To circumvent this later on, you will want an agent that has this, the Protect Target ability. You simply click Protect Target on your assassin, like so, and this way, even if she critically fails her mission and would otherwise be killed, she will not, because you have another agent backing her up. Now then, after our botched assassination mission, let's have a look at Russia. Russia's already been cooking for quite a while, as you can see here. Public opinion has been eroded by repeated public campaign missions from my speaky good characters. Once you've built up enough speaky good, all you need to do is select your character with the highest investigation and a crackdown mission. Now, in an economy the size of Russia, your chances are going to be pretty terrible no matter what, but remember, we can always simply pour more influence into it, and a 66% chance, even a 56% chance, is plenty. You will now notice as well that once you get to this level and you have a fair bit of resources floating, you will see the chances increase by increments. So from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64, and it only increases by +1 each time. So in this case, it is far more sensible to spend influence for a 56% chance twice rather than 64 influence for a 10% increased chance. And when you're dealing with nations like these, you're going to be rolling the dice. Even a 56% chance is actually really, really goddamn good. I've had to crack points in China with a 3% chance, and it's gonna take you forever, but you will eventually succeed. Again, I repeat for the umpteenth time, this is a very long game. Don't worry about rolling the dice on low probabilities so long as there's nothing more immediately pressing that you need to worry about. And speaking of pressing concerns, there is also the Federation option. So, there is one interesting piece of Federation knowledge that you're going to need to know if you want to unify nations, and that is, again, the democracy score, which I don't recall if I mentioned it, but it's a very important piece, so allow me to repeat myself just in case. If you are a nation like the US, for example, at 7.5, and you're trying to integrate a nation like Norway at 9.3, you'll get an error message whenever you try to do so, because your democracy score is too low. You need to be within 1.5 points of the nation you're attempting to unify with to actually capture it. You also need a non-hostile territorial claim on the country's capital. So, for example, I've got Canada here. Canada is in the European Federation, which simply allows me to steal a bunch of their points and use Canada as my private slush fund because, well, fuck the Canadians. But I can't actually confederate Canada, and you can tell who you can and cannot confederate via the Relations tab. By hovering over Canada here, you will see unification requirements with the European Union fail. Why? European Union has a non-hostile claim on Canada original capital region, Toronto, Ottawa. Fail, because I don't have a claim on Toronto, Ottawa. I do have one on Georgetown, however, and I will probably want to cede that territory to the European Union sooner rather than later, because why not? Why should Canada get to own this thing? I don't think they should. There is also going to be cooldowns on your actions. For example, Portugal left the European Union before I was able to take it over, which means that I now need to wait until the 31st of May to rejoin it into the European Union again. And then eventually, after about a year's time in the European Union, I can unify with Portugal, bringing it into the country at large. There are also going to be cases where certain nations will only have certain areas that will be within your sphere of influence, like Sevastopol here, for example, which has a claim on European Union and Ukraine. In these cases, once you take control of the nation, you can actually make it cede individual pieces of territory to the larger entity, which 9 out of 10 times, unless you're trying to build up the other nation, is a very good thing. So, that is what you're going to want to do in the beginning of the middle game of Terra Invicta. Next video, we are going to talk about the military, and there's going to be a lot to talk about the military, as the game has a pretty damn complex ship designer. And honestly, this is where one of the game's problems steps into the picture yet again, in that a lot of military technology is simply just worthless, honestly. 90% of your laser weaponry are terrible. 80% of your coil guns and projectile weapons are terrible. If you're going to fight the aliens, really, only the top 10-20% of your weapon systems are ever going to be worth anything. And of course, if you haven't played the game before, you're not going to know any about this. And certain weapon systems like plasma, it sounds good, but in my experience, plasma is only worthwhile in very specific circumstances, and even then, honestly, just more mass drivers I found to just be vastly superior, honestly. But there is a way to test your builds and your designs, which I will show you next time, as it will save you a lot of resources. Until then, I have been Arch, yet again. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day. Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to the fourth and final entry into the How to Play Terra Invicta guide series, where we are going to discuss the most important part of the video game, without which purging the solar system of filthy competitors and evil aliens will be utterly and completely impossible. Namely, space combat. How to build up a mighty fleet of warships, how to design them, how to test them before you waste thousands of resources on utterly worthless pieces of garbage, and how to deal with enemy space assets. This is a campaign that is a lot further along. In fact, it is the one that I finished on stream some months ago as Humanity First. We're going to use this as the example because we've got all of the technologies anyone could ever desire unlocked. So I can show you all of them, recommend some, and also teach you how to look for good technological options, as part of me simply wants to tell you what drives and what weapons to go for. However, obviously, patches, changes to the game's mechanisms, etc., might mean that a weapon I recommend today is going to be utterly useless in 6 months' time. So you're better off knowing what to look for first. So, the first step is going to be to find this button right here, Fleets and Ship Construction. Now, I already have quite a few ship classes ready to go, and you will build a lot of them in iterative versions over the course of the campaign as well. Once you find an excellent design, you can simply just upgrade it with bigger guns and better engines as you go. But you'll want Ship Designer to begin with. This is where your battle fleet will be born, to venture forth from your dockyards and eventually conquer the solar system. Now, I would highly recommend you don't even bother building warships until you've got at least monitors and probably advanced missile warfare. Hell, even then, I'd be tempted to recommend that you simply ignore space combat until you've got lancers and battleships, because unlike you, the aliens, they arrive with pretty much all of their tech intact, and you're going to be facing battleships pretty much right out of the gate on most occasions, and well, the humble monitor is just not gonna help you against stuff like that. However, there is an early game objective that requires for you to destroy an enemy warship, which unlocks a bunch of new research options, advances the questline, and, most importantly, gives you access to this right here. Exotics. Exotics is the catch-all term for the various metals and components that can only be found within alien starships and alien installations, and it is used in the production of the best weapons and the best armor. So you're gonna want to be stocking up on this pretty damn early and as much as you humanly can for building your proper end game warships. So it might be tempting to venture out into the galaxy and grab some right off the bat, and there is a way to actually do so without destroying an enemy vessel. So, the game has a little bit of a design oddity, you see. We talked previously about things like layered defense arrays, and now that I actually have some bases, I'm sure we can find some. Here we go. Torfinn Karlsfinni base. As you can see, it has 4 Tier 3 battle stations. This is the bare minimum you require if you are to have any hope of seeing off even a small alien fleet. And frankly, it's too big of an investment. They are so unbelievably expensive and so unbelievably useless. Even this will not actually protect you if the aliens really want to destroy your stuff. But alien point defenses are an entirely different deal. Alien point defenses can be utterly, ridiculously lethal, to the point where if you want to destroy an alien base on a planet, I don't know, I think I pretty much wiped out the majority of the alien bases around here by now, but say, for example, that you would like to wipe out a base on an asteroid. Let's see if we can find an example. There we go. Winchester. That's a lovely little rock spinning through space, and it's got a rebel base on it. If I wanted to blow up this thing, assuming it was aliens, you could simply park a fleet above it and orbital bombard the base. But you're gonna take some damage. Enemy orbital defenses are no joke, and even a full-on battle fleet is not going to escape unscathed, and a lucky hit to an engine block might render a battleship helplessly stranded forever until you can bring something over to repair it or bring it extra fuel. It's simply not worth the risk. What you do instead is you simply construct some transport ships. Transport ships, you see, like this troop carrier right here, well, they've got the extreme benefit of not provoking enemy ground fire for some mysterious reason. And so your superhuman space marines can easily invade the enemy-held base without getting shot to pieces. Additionally, whilst alien point defenses are absolutely terrifying, their actual defenders are not really that big of a deal. And so, if you want to take any bases, use troops and transport ships. This is a bit of a sidestep, however. If you really do need to destroy an enemy ship, or you simply want to early on, you can with as little as a simple escort, which is one of the earliest chassis you'll have available. The weapons you'll want to use are missiles, because they are the most effective and earliest available effective weapons, although they will grow obsolete very, very quickly. Preferably, you'd like at least advanced missile warfare, so you can get things like the Vipers. What you're looking for in missiles is not damage, first and foremost. It is the size of the volley, and it is the acceleration and the delta V of the missiles themselves, and finally, the magazines. So, let's go through this step by step. Acceleration is how quickly a missile can, well, speed up, accelerate. Delta V is its fuel for maneuvers and also further acceleration, determining how long the missile can actively burn its engines. This is vital because you need to penetrate enemy point defenses, which are very good. So you need a weapon capable of absolutely booking it to get through the enemy's defenses without getting shot down. And Delta V is useful for catching up to enemy vessels that are very, very maneuverable. The magazine follows the same logic in that you want the maximum number of shots fired at the enemy as quickly as possible to overwhelm their defenses. You can, frankly, safely ignore the vast majority of missiles, because by the time you get access to bigger and better missiles, enemy point defenses are going to be so overwhelming that they're going to be practically useless. It would be nice to land a nuclear torpedo on an enemy warship, but the odds of that happening are nigh on non-existent. There used to be a time when they were absolutely excellent for orbital bombardment, but again, troops are just better for that job. But you can make do with as little as the basic crate missile. You're going to want 2 of them, and you want to set them to focus fire, as Well, I'll be honest with you. This chassis, it's not coming back home. This is very much so a one-way trip. No defensive weapons for you, only the hope that you can get off enough missiles to destroy the enemy warship and then die gloriously. After which, you want to mount armor on your vessel. I highly recommend you save for nanotube armor at least. It is a relatively early weapons upgrade, and it will make a world of difference on the mass of your ship. As you can see now, the wet mass is 1,159 tons. If I change that to steel armor, it's 3,508 tons. And weight is of course very important, as it's the primary metric of how quickly you can move your ship, which is, well, the entire purpose of a navy is to have mobile defenses rather than stationary ones. Now, this does not mean that the armor is more effective. 1 point of armor is 1 point of armor. It is simply that nanotube armor is vastly more effective than steel armor, and so you don't need as many inches to provide equivalent protection. So don't think that mounting 24 points of steel armor is really going to be superior to 22 of nanotube armor. Not at all. You're not going to need to armor the midsection or the rear section because, again, this ship isn't coming back home, and the only reason you're armoring the front is to buy it enough time to get off its missiles. But there is one module you absolutely must have, and that is the targeting computer. At a super early point, you're probably only going to have Mark 1, which is going to cause you some problems, but you have to have it. This is absolutely, utterly non-negotiable. Without a targeting computer, the alien warship's electronic countermeasures will completely paralyze your weapon systems. It'll shut them down, and you'll be lucky to be able to fire a third of your weapon systems in a single volley. Lucky too. Even with targeting computers Mark 1, you're probably only going to be able to dump half of your weapons at a time, which is again going to severely impact your ability to overcome enemy point defenses. So you want to upgrade this ASAP. And you would also like ECM. Now, ECM is not effective against alien warships until much later upgrades, but eventually you do want ECM. The second module is a simple magazine. The magazine increases the amount of munitions all of your weapons can carry. So if the crate missiles begin with 18, the magazine will simply increase that by an additional 50%. Vital for missile boats. You don't really use it for anything else, but missile boats need loads and loads and loads of magazines. As for radiators and power plants, it's going to depend a little bit on what you've got available. For radiators, what you're looking for is preferably something with a minimum amount of vulnerability. So, the aluminium fin radiators have very high vulnerability, which means that they have a very high chance of getting hit and destroyed during combat. This is not good, and you'd rather have something like the ionic dust radiators or the much later ons, which have low or very low vulnerability. This allows you to keep the radiators out and active during combat without risking being damaged. This is important because, well, it's not on a missile boat. Missile boats don't really care. But later on, all of that energy from firing your weapons needs to go somewhere. And if you don't have a way to radiate it out of your warship, eventually you're just going to cook your people alive. And before you're allowed to do that, your ship will shut down and you'll be a sitting duck. So radiators are very important. You might only have access to aluminum fin radiators to begin with, which is fine. You can just retract these for combat because, again, the ship is not going to be producing a lot of heat and it's not going to be surviving anyway, so shrug. You're probably also only going to have access to some very basic engines. At this point, it doesn't really matter what kind of engine you have, just slap something on and send it against the enemy. This is the suicide boat. You're going to want 6 of these. at least, probably. You'd prefer way more, like something like 12 plus. You want at least 4 kps of delta V so that you don't spin off into space and can never be seen again, which is also in many cases going to cost a lot of propellant tanks. Propellant tanks increases the ship's weight, which is not good, and also devours huge amount of resources. This also depends on the engine itself, with some engines being vastly more effective than others, which we will touch upon in a second. This is the reason, by the way, why I don't recommend that you do this. You're going to want 6, 8, 12 of these ships to attack a single enemy warship, and even then, it's not a guarantee you're going to be able to win, as a lot's going to come down to the RNG dice rolling of your targeting computer. We're going to demonstrate this later in the scenario simulator. But you might be able to take on like a single cruiser with 8 odd of these things. It's going to cost an assload of resources, but you will gain access to some more technology, complete the objective, and gain your first little bounty of exotics. None of which really matters enough for you to hurry, honestly. Let's instead look at some more realistic designs, shall we? The Monitor is your first decently combat-capable vessel, in my opinion, where you have 4 weapon slots, 3 utility slots, then the radiator, and the engine, and the main generator. Again, you're gonna want to go for missiles, preferably advanced missiles, so you can mount something like the Viper. You're going to want 3 Vipers, and then you're going to want either something like a 40mm autocannon, or if you have it, something like a point defense laser turret. Although I almost kind of prefer the 40mm cannon these days. The cannon, you put it in Guardian mode, or actually in defense mode, like so, which means that it will only engage enemy incoming projectiles, missiles, things that'll blow you up. Meanwhile, the missiles themselves, you always put in focus fire mode. You don't want to waste them shooting down enemy missiles. Utterly, a complete and utter waste of time. Slap on as much armor as you can to try and give them a little bit of survivability, the highest level of ECM you can get, and then just as many magazines as you can fit to max out the numbers of missiles you've got available. Don't worry about radiators or batteries on these ships, they're not going to need it. Again, the least vulnerable radiator you have, and when it comes to drivers, let's address this for a second. Drivers have quite a lot of statistics. The ones you really need to care about is the ability to move either at long range or short range. Once you click it, you will see the paper doll over here of the ship's performance update. Most of the stats that you need to worry about are simple ups and downs, like rating 2.2. The higher this is, the better. The higher this rating is, the better. Power use efficiency is usually not something you're going to worry about, but it is in relation to your radiators. The less effective a engine is, the more heat you have to radiate. So either you need to radiate it via a radiator, or you need to use a utility module like a heat sink like these to sink the oil into a fluid so that you don't cook your own crew. But more importantly is what the engine actually does. If you are going to have a simple orbital defense flotilla, then what you're looking for is the highest amount of cruise acceleration available. This is your ability to move quickly and to get a high speed quickly. If you are simply intercepting an enemy fleet, you don't need to worry as much about cruise delta V, which of course is going to require more propellant tanks. For a basic intercept fleet, and this is a terrible engine, mind you, you're going to want round about 4 kps. That'll guarantee that you can usually get to the enemy ship in close orbit and return to your station without being slung off into the void of space. It's a bit risky, but it's the bare minimum. And again, you just want to focus on maximum cruise acceleration. And the cruise acceleration, of course, goes down the more propellant tanks and the heavier your ship is going to be, with more effective engines having radically different stats in these regards. You can usually determine this by looking at the thrust rating. The higher the thrust rating, the higher the cruise acceleration in all due likelihood. Although, most times, you kind of just have to research the engine and slap it on your vessel to figure out what its performance is truly like. One of the first engines that I would usually suggest people pick up is the Grid Drive. It is a roundabout mid-level engine, and the reason I recommend it is because it has very, very cheap cruise delta V. It has terrible acceleration, but its high acceleration isn't ideal. It's what you'd prefer on a defensive fleet. It's not an absolute requirement so long as you carry out intercepts well in advance of the enemy fleet reaching you, so that your fleet is waiting in position to attack the enemy the moment they enter your orbit. And Cruise Delta V is used to travel across the solar system. So if you have 30 kps, you can travel from Earth, for example, to Mars or Mercury with no trouble. I value this greatly because say that your initial fleet on Mars gets destroyed. Okay, you could build a new station around the orbit of Mars. You absolutely could. Then you could rebuild all of your space manufacturing, and then you could rebuild all of your warships, and it'll take you for absolute fucking ever. Or you could skip most of that, build the fleet on Earth, and simply send it over to Mars. The strategic flexibility of having a ship with a good Delta V is, to me, just straight up worth it. But technically, acceleration is what you want in a defensive fleet. And then you plonk on the best engine you've got available, which is usually dependent upon tonnage. The better the engine, the more energy it's going to put out in the lower weight category with less weight. And costs also has something to do with it, although it's usually not enormous. Though, in certain cases where you are very low on fissiles, for example, you might not want a fission or a fusion reactor for obvious reasons. And this vessel, since it's meant to actually survive something, you maximize front armor, 2 middle armor, and 1 or 2 rear armor just in case something's going to get behind you. This is a vessel that in numbers, 6 to 8, will be able to take on enemy formations with no casualties. Usually only something like, 3-4 cruisers or something, not an entire battle fleet, but this is the first design you make that is going to have a decent chance at sinking the enemy without sustaining devastating casualties yourself. However, the weapons are the problem. There will come a point where your Viper missiles are simply not going to penetrate the enemy's point defenses anymore, virtually no matter how many of them you bring. If you're up against something like an alien mothership or a number of battleships, they can shoot down just about however many missiles you care to bring. So, yeah. There is one more sneaky little design I want to show you, though, for an alternative to this. So, missiles are obviously what you'd think would be the best, because they're nice, they're fast, they can penetrate enemy point defenses, and they're going to hit pretty damn hard. However, do not underestimate the beauty of the 40mm autocannon, my friends. Oh no! No indeed. You would be surprised what the humble Bert can do. If you take a monitor, you give it one gun that is placed to, for example, Guardian mode, so it focuses on incoming ammunition first, then 3 more Bert set to aggressive, well, you'd be very surprised what that can actually do. They've also introduced a new firing mode, which I really like, by the way, and it is the bracket fire mode. This means that instead of shooting everything at the target, it tries to shoot a little bit around the target, increasing your chances of shooting down an enemy vessel that is maneuvering hard. It's by no stretch of the imagination guaranteed, but it is a lot more effective. Now then, let me demonstrate these designs to you first, before we get into the endgame stuff that you want to aim for later down the line. So, how do you simulate space combat? How do you check your design before committing all of those resources to building a fleet that might just get murdered in its very first encounter? That is the skirmish button. Now, the skirmish button might sound like oh, it's just a fleet on fleet thing. It's something you mess around with a little bit. What use is this? You can add player ships. So what you do here is you select your faction, then you click add player ships, and then you'll see a bunch of randomly designed vessels, none of which are yours, and then import from save. This is the important one. Let's take our save for tech tests and we click import. Once you are beginning to import the save game, it will take all of your customly designed vessels and make them available in the skirmish mode, where you then click on the ship and you will see down here all of your custom made warships right there. This is how you can just select one, like the Suicide Trash Can class escort, and add in however many you want. Then you take the enemy fleet, like the aliens, and you set up the battle that you would like to simulate. Now, last time, not all of the alien warships are in the simulator, which is a little bit silly, and there are certain warships that, well, will just kind of absolutely annihilate your ass, which is rather unfortunate. But this is how you simulate space battles to check the capabilities of your warships. Now, early on, what you're going to be running into majoritively are probably things like singular cruisers or smatterings of smaller warships. But honestly, the smaller warships are half the time even more dangerous than the big ones. Which sounds silly, but is very much so the case. Let's now have a look at a couple of example scenarios, shall we? Starting with the humble Suicide Trash Can. This is the equivalent of the ship we designed in the campaign earlier. It's a rather sad little vessel. It really is. As you can see, its radiators are currently extended. You don't need to worry too much about that, as you're not really going to be radiating that much heat with these small vessels, but you'll see that the weapons have a range of 800 kilometers. Now, when you want to fire these weapons depends majoritively on the class of vessel you have. In the case of the little Suicide Trash Cans, as you can see, they start taking damage pretty much immediately at maximum range, so you just want to fire as soon as you can, really. You ain't got time to faff about. As the missiles are fired, you will see they are simply mag dumped into the ether as quickly as possible. And sometimes you will notice this icon right here. This icon means that the enemy's electronic countermeasures have locked your weapon's ability to fire, and so that weapon will not be able to fire until a lengthy cooldown period comes to an end. This is the Achilles heel of missile-based weaponry, because remember, to overcome the enemy's point defenses, you need to dump the maximum number of missiles into the void simultaneously, which means that only being able to dump half of your weapons is really, really bad. And there goes our first suicidal trash can. If we zoom out a little bit, you will see the missiles as little red dots. We're going to speed up there, and this is probably not going to go very well, I can't lie to you. A single enemy cruiser. It's already destroying our ships, and there comes the enemy's point defenses. As you can see, they're pretty damn good, and this is one enemy warship right here. There's probably going to be enough to overwhelm it in this case. There we go, maybe? Okay, we're beginning to get some impacts. There we are. So, the impacts are now beginning to hit the enemy warships, and they are dealing damage. But enemy ships are pretty heavily armored as well, so you are going to need quite a lot of hits. Unless you are able to try and hit the midship or the rear parts of the armor, which are usually less guarded. Now, we are actually beginning to penetrate and do some damage. Whether or not enough missiles get through, however, no. No, they don't. This is why, if you're going to use suicide trash cans, if all of the missiles had been fired at the same time and hit at the same time, it would probably have been enough to destroy the cruiser. Against smaller, more maneuverable vessels, if anything, your odds are even worse, because a bunch of your missiles will simply miss the target. If you're going to do this, you need to dedicate 8, 10, 12 ships to be able to take down even something like a single enemy cruiser. Or you need to get very lucky with a smaller enemy warship. Again, possible, but not recommended. Let's up the ante a little bit. Now we're going to bring our monitor ships. Now, in the in-game technological rating, these are only 1 point more powerful than the suicidal trash cans. 1 point. And we have doubled the amount of enemy ships to 2 cruisers, which are the equivalent of the ship we just faced off against. Now, in this case, we have a little bit more defenses, and so we can afford to get a little bit closer before we start worrying about our counterfire. We also have our 40mm cannons that will begin engaging the enemy warship's incoming missiles, and they do a pretty damn good job of it. I would still say on average, in larger ships, you're going to want to prefer point defense lasers, but the 40 mils are genuinely pretty damn amazing, in my opinion. So, you will usually want to try and get somewhat close to the enemy before you begin firing your missiles, as the closer you are, the less opportunity the enemy vessels are going to have to react to the launch of your weapon systems. In the case of this scenario, though, they're going to start firing fairly early, so we're going to have 3 ships on each of them. There goes the weapon systems. And now that we have 1 more weapon system per ship, you will also notice we are no longer using the crate systems. We are using the Vipers. And I think you will find that the difference between them is probably worth saving for. Let's zoom out a little bit, and we can see the red markers beginning to close in on the enemy warships. The long-range laser systems are primarily focusing on our own ships now, and there goes the point defenses. It's a lot of point defenses, but nowhere even remotely close to enough. This is why we wait. Instead of sending a bunch of suicidal warships out, that's going to cost you like 1,000 of each resource, wait a minute, get the monitor, get advanced missile weapons. And suddenly, you're not just engaging the enemy effectively, you're wiping them out at 0 cost to your own forces. And one final example. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the Burt class warship. If you don't have the time or the interest in saving for advanced missile warfare, this is going to be your by far best alternative. The Burt simply carries 4 40mm autocannons, 3 of which will be set to pure offense, and 1 of which will be set to Guardian mode to shoot down incoming enemy missiles. This is pretty much one of the most primitive weapons you have access to, as you get it pretty much right off the bat. And it is literally just a ginormous Gatling gun mounted on a monitor chassis. Now, you will notice I have 1 more warship in the mix here. As with the Burt, you want a little larger number of ships, as the only thing you want here is, well, you know, with missiles, you were attempting to overcome the enemy's point defenses. Well, a 40mm round, quite conveniently, is very, very tiny. And so whilst it's enough to detonate, say, an incoming missile weapon of the enemy, they aren't actually large enough to make the enemy fire their point defenses at them. Now, of course, what is a 40mm round going to do to a massive enemy warship? A huge vessel that we saw shrug off missile detonations earlier. Well, I'll let the damage readout speak for itself. Pretty nice, right? So, the reason why that happened is simply because the 40mm cannon rounds by themselves do basically no damage. In fact, the majority of the time they will do quite literally no damage, beyond chipping off a little bit of armor here and there, and it's not enough to really matter. However, when you are hitting the enemy warship with 100 of these impacts every single solitary minute, when you are literally polluting space with dozens of tons of lead, you're gonna get critical strikes, and those critical strikes will do damage. It might not be much, it might be only 1 out of every 50 hits that does a crit, but they will do damage. And additionally, you may notice this ship is not shooting back right now, despite the fact that it was, of course, firing at me a little bit earlier. The reason for this is that all of those hits, all of those critical hits, are actually damaging the enemy ship's internal components. It's damaging its guidance systems, it's damaging its weapons, it's damaging its engines, all of these things continuously, which basically stun locks the ever-living shit out of the enemy warship. Now, this obviously does have a rather sizable RNG component, because you're basically crit fishing with just the maximum number of hits available. This means that sometimes you're going to go up against 2 enemy cruisers and you're going to blow both of them apart. Sometimes you might not even get one of them. Other times, like this, you're going to hit kind of like a nice middle ground where we destroyed 1 enemy cruiser and we are going to leave the second one absolutely beat to shit and crippled. And the best part is, we didn't even lose a warship out of all of that. And as an added bonus, guess what? 40mm autocannon rounds are a hell of a lot cheaper to resupply than missiles are. So if you really do want to get a very early kill against enemy warships, especially against smaller warships, mind you, the 40mm autocannon is your god. Worship it, pray to RNGesus, and watch it reward you amply. Having then showered the 40mm autocannon with the praise, love, and adoration it deserves, let's look at what you want to go for endgame then, and some specific weapon systems. So, most of these chats is frankly useless, beyond things like using the frigate for a transport, for example, or using smaller ships with just minimum mass for taxis to carry counselors throughout the solar system. The chassis you want to focus on is the Monitor for early game potential, and then maybe the battle cruiser and battleship mid-game. And then eventually you just want Lancers and Dreadnoughts. Titans, don't worry about them. They don't carry enough additional firepower to really be worth mentioning, honestly. And, well, you can simply just use a Lancer to carry the same kind of super heavy ordnance. And Titans, they're just too gosh darn heavy to be of use. The extra weight doesn't really add anything worthwhile, though they are pretty, if nothing else. So, the reason why you want to have a mix of ships, you want dreadnoughts and you want lancers, or you want battle cruisers and you want battleships. This is because they are supposed to do two different things. The battleship is there to overwhelm the enemy's point defenses and do damage to their larger warships. This is also the purpose of the dreadnought. The way you do this is by using magnetic weaponry. These are solid fire railgun projectiles. The way you want to do it is by weight of fire. A single projectile is going to get shot down. 100 projectiles? A lot more difficult. This is also why you don't want to be using the larger batteries, as you have a choice of 3 different sizes. You can bring a single light coil gun battery, a double coil gun battery, or a large quintuple railgun battery, as you can see here. The bigger batteries are nice in that they hit harder and that they have a higher muzzle velocity. The muzzle velocity is very, very useful to overcome enemy point defenses simply because the projectile will be moving a lot faster. The faster the projectile moves, not only does it get to its target quicker, but it also hits harder, as the game does simulate the speed of a projectile. You will often want 2 distinct types of these larger warships. One of them might be the Valhalla class, as we can see right here. The Valhalla class is a defensive warship. It carries two laser cannons, simple 60cm ultraviolet set to do defensive, and 2 point defense turrets, along with the largest nose-mounted gun it carries, and 1 heavy coil gun battery on the back. This is meant to kill stuff. The heavy coil gun fires very quickly, hits very hard, and will take multiple hits from enemy point defenses to destroy. The heavy coil gun then adds extra killing power to this list. These vessels are then backed up by weapon platforms like, I believe it was the North Sea. It's been too long since I played this playthrough. Yes, the North Sea. The North Sea also brings some defensive power, as you're going to want a lot of it, in the form of 2-point defense phaser turrets. You can probably sacrifice one of these, honestly, but as you can see, it brings light coil gun batteries. The reason why you want these is because they fire more shots. If the enemy has to engage 2 shots, then it doesn't really matter how fast they are or how heavy they are, they're going to shoot them down. If, however, those 2 super heavy shots are masked by 4 lighter shots, suddenly the amount of point defense the enemy need to put out to stop you has increased dramatically. And you want a roughly even mix between the two to maximize your killing potential, as you need to hit that sweet spot where you're overwhelming the enemy's point defenses whilst also being able to actually damage their ships. As the light coil gun battery, it simply doesn't hit hard enough to overcome late game alien armor, so you're going to need the bigger guns to deal the oomph damage at the end. You are also going to bring some specialized laser weaponries as well. So this is why we use the Lancer or the Battle Cruiser, because you can see they have large nose mounts. So there is a difference between hull-mounted weaponry and nose-mounted weaponry. As you can see, the shape of the weapon is slightly different. A hull mount, it will fit in these slots right here. A nose mount can only be placed in the nose. They can either be small batteries or larger batteries, taking up a larger number of slots. Now, there is an argument to be made, by the way, for loads of smaller forward-facing guns like this. This can be very effective as a single umbrella defensive warship. I have had some success with this design of simply having a couple of point defenses, or more likely just single lasers, and then a large battery of smaller nose guns, as this does give you quite a bit of intercept capacity, although generally speaking, if you're going to do that, just do it with a battleship instead, as you're going to get a larger number of laser weaponries engaging the enemy and shooting down their projectiles. And here's the crucial thing. Enemy armor, alien armor, is very, very, very good, to the point where the majority of laser weapons are just kind of useless, frankly. Laser weapons are a thing that you research for the end game tree, and that's pretty much it. Infrared lasers are actually worthless. For anything beyond added point defense, don't use them, they're terrible. Green lasers, same problem, useless. It's only when you get ultraviolet that things begin to look up. And if you use the largest ultraviolet mounts that you can find, they do something, which is about all I can really say for them. They will help you deal with smaller enemy flanking vessels, so long as you can get mid-section or rear section shots, but they're not going to be dealing with enemy mainline warships. Even when you get the largest possible ultraviolet phaser batteries, you're still going to really struggle to do damage to enemy warships frontally, but that is not the purpose of the Lancer. The Lancer is there to protect your flanks, as many smaller alien warships will fly around your fleet. Their capital ships will come straight at you from the front. It is the battleship's duty to destroy those with mass drivers. These ships are meant to all be gathered together and fired in group against individual small enemy warships one at a time, focusing all of these titanic weapons on a single ship until it's destroyed or crippled. Then you switch to the next ship, and so on until you've picked up all of the enemy flankers. And the reason why you absolutely need to do this is because of the way armor works. If we look at one of our late game here, like the Valhalla Ultras, for example, you will see they've got quite a lot of frontal armor, 50, but they have next to no middle and rear armor at all. This is because, look at the tonnage here, 60.618. If I add one frontal armor, it increases by about 100 tons. Not a big deal. I add one side armor, it increases by 1,000 tons. It is because it is a lot cheaper to armor the narrow front than the long side. So side armor is very, very expensive. And if you're going to have enough to actually protect the ship, oh boy, you're gonna have an immobile brick that will require dozens of engines and ridiculous amount of propellants just to move it, along with a very, very powerful engine as well. It's not worth it. It is far better to destroy the enemy trying to flank you than make a fleet of immobile battle bricks. Far better to simply destroy the enemy warships instead. Again, however, laser weapons only really useful at the largest size. You might want to space in a few smaller ones like these occasionally to add to your point defense. And the reason for that is the targeting range of the point defense battery is 135 kilometers. The targeting range of the ultraviolet arc laser battery is 600 kilometers and a defensive target range of 200. Vastly superior for the task. It also delivers more damage, but can shoot down larger enemy projectiles. Very, very, very useful. You are also going to want to bring a command vessel. In my case, they are the Jarl class of warship. We'll have a look at the battleship right here. The Jarl class is special because it carries a flag bridge. The flag bridge is another piece of absolutely vital tech because it reduces the command strain, so this thing right here, of the entire fleet by 20%. Huge, 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 huge deal. But the enemy are going to focus your Jarls down. They know which vessels are the command vessels, and they will focus their fire on them, which is why you usually want to add in another solid 10, maybe even 20 front armor above what you have under your regular ships to your Jarl. I also prefer to have my single Jarl just weighted down with as many single shot lasers as it can get to add to the defensive capabilities of the fleet overall. Because of its extended range, it doesn't just have to engage projectiles fired at it can extend an umbrella of fire cover over the entire fleet, which is very, very, very useful. You'll also notice the Muon Spiker. So these are part of very good later game research, like the Muon Spiker and the Neutronium Spiker and the Antimatter Spiker. These are engine boosts. You see, if I remove it, I lose cruise acceleration. This is because the Muon Spiker works with my engine to accelerate the rate of, well, explosions and forwardness and, whooshiness. Yes, it increases my whooshiness. That's all you need to know. And whilst it does add some tonnage, it increases the whooshiness far more than the added weight. So you pretty much always want to slap one of these on. There's no real loss to doing so, and the additional speed is always nice. There are even some combinations that can be drastically improve your ship's overall performance. Now, you don't really want, by the way, to bring heat sinks. So heat sinks, I feel like heat sinks needs a buff or some additional utility or something, because the moment you get something like the lithium spray radiator with its very low vulnerability, you don't bring heat sinks, because the chances of your radiator being destroyed are next to nothing, and the chances of you overloading your radiator by firing your weapons is next to nothing. So why would you take another 205 tons to dump heat? These need a boost or some sort of redesign, I think, to make them more valuable and actually, give them some purpose. I would also recommend at least one ship, or most often all of them, to have repair bays, and you also want some salvage bays, because that increases the amount of those delicious, delicious exotics you're picking up. Don't worry about munitions, by the way. Even when you are using solid shot weaponry like the railguns, you're not gonna run out of ammo. I have never ran out of ammo in a single battle on anything but the largest of guns. So, not really a big problem. There are also some little niche weapons for you to consider. Plasma weapons is one of them. I have played around a fair bit with plasma to see if I could find some sort of decent use for them, and not really, honestly. So plasma functions in kind of a weird way in that it sort of targets the enemy's armor. So what you would think you'd do is you'd take a plasma to strip away enemy's armor, and you'd combine that with a large laser, as the primary debuff, the primary reason why the laser is so bad, is that its destructive power gets reduced a lot by armor. Now, this is a maximum level laser, and it still has its damage reduced by 17% over 600 kilometers by armor. Even at point blank range, it's still getting a damage debuff. So if you take away the armor, the laser hits harder. And this is true, but the plasma takes so long to eat through the enemy armor that you might as well just bring a railgun at that point, and it would do pretty much the same job. Plasma does travel faster and can also be more effective against smaller vessels, but at that point, you just bring more lasers to destroy the smaller vessels. I can see some niche potential where you simply put the maximum amount of plasma you can on a single warship in your fleet and use that to weaken key enemy targets to allow the lasers to do a bit more damage, but again, it really feels like you'd just be better off firing your coil guns at it instead. Now, particle beams are a very cute potential idea with things like the ion battery, for example. So, the reason why this is kind of adorable is that it doesn't destroy the enemy ship in the same way that a laser or a magnetic does. Instead, it tries to fill the enemy warship with lethal radiation, disrupting electronics and disabling crew members. Now, this has a couple of interesting little uses. Because it doesn't destroy the enemy warship, it can allow you early game to disable enemy warships, crippling them without destroying them. And because you're not destroying them, you're not raising the enemy's hate level. It's niche, but it is a potential use for these weapons. Additionally, I can see an argument for bringing a big ship that has the maximum number of long-range particle beam batteries to again disable key enemy warships and reduce the amount of shots coming in at you. They can also be used to disable systems, which means they can be used to disable enemy point defenses, which makes it easier for the rest of your railgun weaponry to get through. But I would only ever use this as an additional ancillary vessel. You know, one more add-on vessel to make the overall fleet a tiny bit more effective. And speaking of effective, there is another must-have research, and that is the advanced laser engines. If you have a ship that is going to focus on doing laser damage, mount it up with every advanced laser engine you can find. All of it. They stack and they add to the power of your lasers. Even the largest lasers in the game, mounted on one of the biggest ships in the game, nose ships, well, they're actually going to be kind of terrible without them. Let's see, I've got there we go, the Moonin Ultra Block 3. There we are. Oh no, that's the Spinal Siege Coiler instead of, well, big gun is big gun. You need the laser engines to power up the lasers. This is not a laser. This is the snipers. The snipers also, by the way, are there just to destroy enemy capital vessels. This is for motherships and stuff like that, where the entire ship is just one ginormous gun. Very useful, and I do highly recommend them. But if we were to take a large laser weapon instead, you pretty much just want to bring all of your advanced laser engines, with the only other thing you want is, again, targeting computers. Never leave home without a targeting computer. ECMs can also help, but I've noticed relatively little difference in using ECM or not using ECM, so It really is not the biggest of deals in my opinion and experience. You might also want to bring some batteries, especially for your larger laser weapons, as they use a fair bit of energy, but with the size of the reactors you have at this point, often the batteries too are going to be superfluous. Make the design, load it up in the skirmish setting, and see if it drains all of its power in one shot. Bring some batteries. Any other circumstance, ignore the batteries, as they're not going to help you anywhere near as much as a bigger and better engine is, or reactor, more correctly. And finally, missiles. Just ignore them. Just ignore them. Again, it sounds like a really nice thing to be able to deliver damage, and it's damage 1.1 billion megajoules. Don't get me wrong, if that ever lands on something, it is going to fucking delete it. But the odds of it ever landing? Not good. And furthermore, its magazine size is pathetic. Even if you took the biggest ship you could with this, let's see, we'd probably want a nice dreadnought, yeah? A dreadnought. And we load it down with, what's the largest magazine size we've got? Is it just 4? It's just 4, isn't it? Okay. Load it down as many of these we can, and then you slap on as many magazines as you can, you're going to have a grand total of 24 base, 100 total, 18. Okay, so yeah, you're gonna have a little over 100 odd total missiles. Is that going to be enough to overwhelm point defenses? I'd be surprised. Now, you might have this as an ancillary vessel yet again. I could see an argument for having one of these ships at the back of your fleet, and then you simply carefully allot a couple of missiles here and there. A couple of missiles to that ship, couple of missiles to that ship, couple of missiles to that ship, and if you get lucky and they slip in, being covered by all of the mass driver weaponry, the damage will indeed be absolutely devastating, but 9 times out of 10, I'd just bring another regular mass driver battleship instead, which is a bit unfortunate, and I wish missiles might have some kind of different ability, mayhaps I don't know, something like an advanced guidance system, for example, where instead of striking frontal armor, they always strike mid-armor, for example. Or maybe have a special missile that does that at a higher level. Now that would be dangerous. That would be worth bringing, but otherwise, just stick to mass drivers, frankly. So, at the very end then, let's actually load up a big battle and see how it might work out. As the battle begins, our big boy ships have already started punting out a couple of ranging shots. This is a pretty classical engagement where the enemy's smaller lighter warships, these are the flankers, as you will see, will already start breaking out of the pack. That's what you want to target with your big laser battery warships. They will be able to reach out and touch very, very, very early on. You might also want to lock these so that they actually stay with the enemy, the lock-on target. This means that they'll keep their big guns pointed in their general direction. You want to fire the lasers quite early on as well, so that you might have an opportunity to capture some of the enemy warships flank on, as that will do a whole heaping heck of a lot more damage. You can also use the side view here, so you can see here, to determine how far away an enemy is, as again, you want to be shooting at relatively close range to make sure that your lasers, which don't do a whole lot of damage individually, will be able to do their full damage together. And this in the little battle cruiser right here is already feeling the pain. There's a whole heaping heck of a whole lot of enemy missile weapons coming in our way as well, but we do have a lot of point defense, almost as much as the enemy have at this point. The first enemy skirmisher, I think, just blew up, which is lovely, in which case we simply target the next one in line and keep repeating this procedure until there are no more filthy little enemy warship trying to sneak around us to shoot at our exposed and vulnerable flanks. Our bellies must be protected from the enemy swine. But even then, this is a relatively small flock. You should see some of the battles in the later parts of my campaign playthrough. Oh boy. When you're attacking enemy fleets many times your size, with reinforcements pouring in of dozens of small flanking vessels, your interceptors are going to be very, very, very busy little warships, for better or for worse. With most of the little warships dealt with, we can also start pointing our lasers at the main enemy. Not that we're going to be doing much damage to this kind of range, but might as well. You will also see the enemy's point defenses when they start getting in fleet-size strength like this. It's a lot. It's a real ridiculous lot. And the primary way we get through it is yet again number of projectiles. You will see here are the different speeds of the projectiles coming in. The super heavy shots there in the middle being covered by several smaller shots running out ahead of them to absorb point defense shots. The heavier shots you will see also requires a multitude of enemy point defense hits, so that every time they need to focus on one of the large shells, smaller shells get a little bit closer. Every time they begin intercepting the smaller shells, larger shells get a little bit closer. And so, incrementally, step by step, you begin overwhelming the enemy's point defenses. And once that network starts cracking, then the damage starts flowing. You obviously need to make sure that you yourself have enough point defenses, but fortunately, the enemy's primary weapon throughout the entire campaign is going to be missiles, and missiles can be shot down fairly easily. However, another primary enemy weapon is going to be plasma. That is the reason why Bane here, the Ultra class, is currently taking damage, because the enemy plasma can hit from very long range and is beginning to melt through the Bane's armor. This is basically unavoidable. Plasma moves very quickly, cannot be shot down, and there isn't really any defense against it other than to simply mount even more armor. So plasma is going to be a constant danger, whittling down your armor. And once you start getting closer to be hit by enemy laser weapons, you can suffer some pretty severe damage from just simple mass of plasma. Oh, I just noticed a little Bert class has managed to intrude upon proceedings as well. Well, he's having a lot of fun. And probably hoping to God that he won't need to go to the front line, where his armor will be a little bit underwhelming for this particular confrontation. For formation, I prefer to put my bigger fleets like this in a simple column formation. Early on, wall or high wall is good to just put the maximum number of ships in the exact same line. But this is primarily a missile formation where you're hoping to get all of your weapons off simultaneously. Whereas these ships, the primary purpose of the forward ships is going to be things like the Valhallas. They are there to soak enemy damage and to dish it out. Behind them is the far more vulnerable Moonins and Hugins. These are your most valuable vessels because they are your killers. And so obviously you don't want them near the front line where they can take serious damage. You will also see here, this is the energy bar. Once it begins firing its weapons, it depletes a huge amount of its energy. But due to the sheer scope and scale of its engine, it rebuilds it almost instantly, which again allows you to save yourself some battery expenses. And it seems like the enemy fleet was taken care of very, very easily. The majority of battles you want to end exactly like this one ended. Your lead ship is going to take a beating. That's going to happen pretty much whatever you do, because plasma. It's probably going to lose all of its front armor. It might lose its engines as well, but so long as you have other vessels in the fleet with the repair capabilities, you're going to be able to repair the engines at least to the point where you can get the vessel back home. And that's all at the end of the day that matters, as you want all of your battles to be you wiping the enemy whilst taking no damage. For the simple reason that whilst you've been fucking about on Earth all game, the aliens, they've been mining resources. They've been building warships. They are going to outnumber you in space, and by a lot. So make sure that when you win properly. And that, finally then, concludes the Terra Invicta guide. Hopefully, these multiple hours of me telling you about things and mechanics and stuff and ideas will have helped some of you to get to grips with what is a genuinely amazing game. Terra Invicta is a fantastic title, and it would really be a shame if you didn't try it because it looks too complicated. Especially as, despite what the length of this might indicate, it's genuinely not that bad. Hopefully, you'll give it a chance. Until next time, I've been Arch, thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.